keynote speech delivered by Dr. Siswo Pramono, Director General of the Policy Analysis and Development Agency, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. After that, we will have our distinguished speakers present their point of view on the theme of the seminar. We are grateful to have Dr. Yandry Kurniawan, lecturer at the Department of International Relations from University of Indonesia, Dr. Shafiah F. Muhibat, Head of Department of International Relations from Center for Strategic and International Studies in Indonesia, Professor Wayne Cristaudo, Professor of Political Science from Charles Darwin University, Dr. Nathan Franklin, lecturer in Indonesian Studies from Charles Darwin University. Each will have 15 minutes to present their view. After that, we will have our discussion session in which the speakers will be answering questions. The audience may ask their question by sending it through the chat box that you can find on your screen. For those of you who are watching through the YouTube channel, you may send your questions through the comment section. We would also like to kindly ask you to fill out a questionnaire. There will be a link in the chat box. You can click on it and please fill out the form. Certificate will be provided for those who fill out the questionnaire. We hope you will find the program that we have lined up for you to be fruitful and engaging. I will now invite Professor Dr. Dodi Prayogo to deliver the welcoming remarks. Professor Prayogo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Moderator. Good morning, everyone. Honorable Bapak Dr. Siswo Pramono, Head of Policy Analysis and Development Agency of Indonesian MoFA. Distinguished Speaker, Dr. Shafiah F. Muhibat, Head of Department of International Relations, CSIS Indonesia. Professor Wayne Cristaudo and Dr. Nathan Franklin from Charles Darwin University, Australia. And Dr. Yandry Kurniawan, lecturer at Department of International Relations, FISIP UI, moderator of this seminar, Ibu Dyah Lestari Asmarani, Head of Center of Analysis and Development of Asia Pacific Africa, MoFA, Dr. Nurul Isnaini, Head of Department of International Relations, FISIP UI, and all of my colleagues from Department of International Relations, FISIP UI, who attend this meeting webinar and audience of this seminar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Welcome to this webinar on political landscape of world security during and post-COVID-19, Rivalry or strategic cooperation. This is truly an honor for our faculty to have this webinar, especially in particularly for Department of International Relations, in cooperation with BPPK Kamlu as a host of this webinar. And we are also honored to have Charles Darwin University, who is co-hosting this webinar. The topic is very crucial right now. We are going to discuss about the pandemic in a global scale. We are facing a very rapid changes after the pandemic. And then we have to adapt ourselves, our norms, our rules, and our lifestyle again. That's why I think our foreign minister has flown to China and Arab countries to discuss about the possibilities of how to deal with this pandemic. Along the way, we have witnessed now how nations cooperate one to another to cope with this pandemic. Ibu Menteri Retno Marsudi has multiple occasions called for alliance of multilateralism, suggesting that cooperation is a better way to deal with the pandemic. But at the same time, we also saw conflict between nations despite the pandemic. The dispute over the South China Sea, for example, remains even during the pandemic. Several clashes have taken place in this area this year only. Hence, the theme of this morning webinar is very timely. We will discuss whether cooperation or rivalry will be the dominant feature in state relations in the days ahead. We are lucky that we will listen for highly qualified scholars on this topic from Universitas of Indonesia, CSIS, and Charles Darwin University will lend their analysis on the issue. In particular, it will be interesting to see what we and our neighbor Australia point of view on the landscape of the world security during the post-pandemic era. Dr. Siswo Pramono will provide keynote speech. I believe we'll also touch upon the Indonesian policy on managing future scenarios in the post-pandemic. I have no doubt in mind that this webinar will be a worthwhile experience. We have an opportunity to learn from some of the best experts in this field and hope that we will walk away from this webinar enriched with a better understanding of the issue. May we have a good webinar. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Prayogo. I will now give the floor to our moderators for today's event, Mrs. Dyah Asmarani, Head of the Center of Policy Analysis and Development for Asia Pacific region. Mrs. Dyah, you may have the floor.
Thank you, Diana. A very good morning to all the speakers and also participants. Thank you for joining us today. I am Dyah Asmarani from the Center of Policy Analysis and Development for Asia and Pacific and Africa region, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It is an honor for me to welcome all of you and moderate this international webinar, which held by the Policy Analysis and Development Agency, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in cooperation with the University of Indonesia and Charles Darwin University, Australia. Distinguished participants, the Director General of the World Health Organization has declared the pandemic of coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 on March after the case have exceeded more than 100,000 cases in more than 100 countries. And from the data yesterday, August 26, there are more than 23 million positive cases worldwide and spread across various countries and entities, with the death toll more than 800,000 cases. Considering the scale, many experts say that the pandemic will have wide impact to the various aspects of life, both temporarily and also permanently, and it changed the lifestyle and social aspect of humans. It is also predicted that the pandemic will have a broad impact to the various spectrum of international relations, including the political, security, and economic aspect. In the political and security aspect, it influenced the sharpening of the great power rivalry, repositioning the foreign policy priorities, as well as reshaping the cooperation among countries and within the international organization. And today we have 5 speakers from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, University of Indonesia, Center of Strategic and International Studies, and also Charles Darwin University, who will share with us their view about the theme of the webinar that already mentioned by the Master of Ceremony, the political landscape of world security in the middle and post-COVID-19, rivalry or strategic cooperations. And without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Siswo Pramono, the Director General, Head of Policy Analysis and Development Agency, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to deliver the keynote speech. Pak Siswo, the screen is yours. I think it's still unmute, Pak. You should unmute. Pak Siswo, you could unmute your microphone first. Excuse me, Pak Siswo. Could you unmute first your microphone?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, clear, Pak.
And can you see my slide? Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Sure, Pak.
Okay, good, thank you. Sorry for this technical trouble in the beginning. But yes, Pak Dodi, and then all of the colleagues, Mas Yandry, Mbak Vivi, and Professor Cristaudo and Dr. Franklin. Thank you very much for joining us. I just would like to go through some slides to see how is the situation developing in this region and how our foreign policy is try to do all the best to mitigate the impact of all this development into Indonesia. So the title of our discussion, conversation today is on political landscape of world security during the post-COVID-19. Now, let me start with the political landscape as we know it in the last 10 years, because conflict is not happen overnight; it's built up for years. Yeah? And this is the situation. All the dot or circle here represent conflict, regional conflicts. Now we have East Asia and Western Asia. So most of the conflict in East Asia, Korean Peninsula, East China Sea, South China Sea, Cambodia, Myanmar, Kashmir, mostly domestic conflicts. Here tends to be potential rather than real. Sometimes we have a really hotspot, real conflicts, but most of the time they are potential. We don't have a war, interstate war in East Asia in the last 50 years. There is no such thing. Yeah? But contingency, short of war, limited conflicts, internal conflict, yes, it's still happening. But if you look at this Western Asia region, and to some extent, mostly Africa, this is what the real conflict is happening. You will see armed conflict in the real things. Now, for the millennial generation in Asia, in East Asia, like young people in Indonesia, war is so far away for them. But for the millennial generation in Western Asia, Central Asia, Middle East, and Africa, war is almost a daily reality. Not in every country, but at least they feel close with the armed conflict situation. Now, this is what is happening in the last 10 years. And we have the data from, we did research together with some universities, and we try to map out what happened with the UN Security Council, for instance, from 2015 to 2017, and that's, yes, this really mimicking what I have been saying before. So most of the UN Security Council resolution in the last 3 years, 2015 to 2017, is mostly deal with internal conflict in Africa and the Middle East. So almost 60%, yeah, of the conflict is still there, and there's still real conflict. Now the world reaction on that is pretty much traditional. Then we have a situation where most of the major power increases the military budget, and that is what's happening today. So this is a projection from 1997 into 2030. So America is going to have almost 1 trillion, more than 1 trillion of military budget in 2030s, and China ranks second with about 736 billion. Yeah. So I think this is something that serious, and we need to always keep an eye on that. And if I may to reflect in the bubble, and this will be the bubble. Yeah, so this is the situation of military budget in United States, for instance. This one is 1997, and this one is 2017, and this one is the coming 2030s. Yeah. So if you compare, this is America in 2030s, this is China in 2030s. Now, but just be careful with all the coloring. Yeah, yellow means we are developing countries, and green, like America, that means they are developed countries, stable politically. If blue is the best, yes, it's sustainable politically and economically as well. So in most developing countries, as you see in the first map, we still have a potential conflicts, mostly domestic, and this is why the role of the military is not only for external defense, but to some extent they also help on the domestic situation, mostly military operation other than war, or helping the police to deal with extremisms. And that's what happened mostly in the yellow ground. So if America have $1 trillion of military budget, it's mostly for external defense rather than from domestic defense. They have their own national guard for domestic defense. So this will be the case if we compare what happened and the increasing military budget in most of developed countries like Europe or the United States, North America, mostly for external defense. But in Asia, at least, if you have increasing budget, the nature of developing countries is not totally for external defense, but to some extent they need also to help the situation domestically. Now, against it on the budget, and what is the perception today? This is very funny. This is from a few research centers, just recently issued 2019. Yeah. I think most of the big power, the neighbor don't like them. So for the US, the Mexican thinks that America is a threat for Mexico, 56%. Yeah, this is the case with Argentina. Now in Asia, we have China. And the neighboring countries like Australia think China is a big threat, 40%, even though Australian trade with China is the largest, and the Australian trade with the world, yeah, I think now it's 35% or so, the total trade between Australia and China. But Korea thinks China is a threat, yeah, and just this is a funny situation. If you have big powers, your neighbor feel threatened rather than your distant neighbors. Yeah. Now, but let's move to the situation in Asia in the last for 20 years. So we call the rise of Asia. So you see another bubble here. Yeah, the bubble is the reflecting the GDP purchasing power parity in every region. Yeah. So this is the situation in 1985. The other part, this is the situation in 2000, and then 2015, and then 2021, and 2024. So we are developing. Yeah, the bubble is very, very, very fast. Yeah, this is the fast-growing GDP purchasing power parity. I think the fastest in the world will be in East Asia, and they are very much connected one to the other. So you have a connection of GDP, and GDP in one single place. So this is the rise of Asia all about. Peaceful. There is no much real conflicts in the last 50 years compared with other regions. People are concentrating more on the economic development, and there is more integration in terms of the economics. Yeah, now we are moving toward RCEP. Yeah, and Indonesia is insisting that RCEP must be signed by the end of the year. Without India, but India can come aboard anytime if she wishes to. Yeah, and then we have another big economies in Europe, and this is America. So this is the projection from 2085 to 2024. Yeah, so you can see here conglomeration of the GDPs in East Asia is very important, and this is actually now the center of gravity, economic gravity of the world. Yeah. Now, if we look at the real situation, then you can see the bubble that I mentioned before, not the bubble actually, the circle here, the density of the GDP purchasing power parity, and we have three pillars actually. The first one is East Asia with RCEP, yeah, and then we are talking about 27 trillion. GDP purchasing power parity combined with 3.5 billion people, mostly young people, demographic bonus, yeah. And then this is the first pillar of the world economy today. And then it is sustained by China, by India, ASEAN, yeah, and Indonesia is one of them. Now then we have North America. North America is a very important region, yeah. We are talking about 23 trillion, yeah, a little bit smaller than East Asia. We have 500 million people, and they are still young as well. It's not aging. Yep. Yeah. And then we have European Union. And European Union is 16 trillion GDP combined, and 500 million people, and mostly aging. Yeah, but now what happened? Yeah, when COVID strike the world, the first they strike East Asia first, and then we are collapsed because of COVID. Yeah, and then after that they strike Europe as the center of the world economy as well, and then United States. Now Asia is recovering sooner, and then after that Europe, and perhaps later on United States. And this is the situation today. But before we look at the COVID situation, we need to look at the size of the industries and business and so on. So this is the map of the world when we look at during the World War II or during decolonization, and this is today. Yeah, all of the growth, economic growth, is sustained by industry, mostly by business. And if you look at of the world top 100 economic revenue collectors, 29 are state and 71 are actually corporate companies. Yeah, and out of 71 largest companies in the world, 25% are Asian, 25 are Asian, and this growing. So if you look at this here, the black represents state, the red represent companies, yeah, and the one with dot is ASEAN companies, and it's growing very fast. It's mostly there are Chinese companies, Japanese companies, Korea, and now coming India, yeah, but it's not yet in the map, yeah, but companies like Hinduja, company like Mahindra Group, yeah, they will be coming in the list as well, and as a matter of short time, they will be coming. Yeah. So this is Asia now. This is Asian century that we are talking. Yeah. Then the concentration now. But why? Yes, if you look at this picture, this first pillars of the global economy is yellow. Yeah, and here is green and blue, and here mostly blue. Yeah, we have very big blue. This is Australia. It's very sustainable economy. Yeah, and very sustainable politics. Yeah, but the rest of the pillar of the economy here are either yellow. Yeah. There we have some green. This is Japan and Korea, or some red. Yeah, still in Myanmar and others. Yeah, meaning that largely we are still developing countries. Yeah. No, but look at the inside of every country. I represent Indonesia. You can see that a lot of improvement, and this is the so-called indicator of fragile state index. Yeah, and we have a lot of improvement. Most countries in ASEAN. Yeah. So if the curve move from up to down here, that means improvement from fragile into less fragile. And we see that most of the curve of the indicator is moving down. That means that we are moving from fragile into less fragile. So perhaps 10 years from now, our color change from yellow into perhaps light green, yeah, just like Mongolia. Now you can see here, Mongolia, it used to be yellow, but now it's like green. Yeah, this is we are moving that. But of course, we are not dreaming like we jump to blue like in Australia. Australia is a very mature economy, but perhaps we can go to light greens and then dark green, and perhaps one day all the region can be green or blue as well. Yeah. So, but again here, you look at the parameters. Yeah, in Indonesian case, yeah, most of the improvement coming from this line. This is economic inequality. That means our Gini index is getting better, less inequality than before. Public service, you see that there's improvement going down here. Economy, yeah, there's a lot of improvement, and state legitimacy. Why? Because we are democratic country, so that's why state legitimacy is very high. So this is the indicator by Fund for Peace, and monitoring the whole development for the last 15 years from 2006 to 2020. So I think this is very important data, and this is the average. Anything below the average means that we are very stable, and this is our homework, so above the average. So we still have a problem with factionalist elite. We still have problems perhaps with need to improve more on the security apparatus and so on. Yeah, we still have problem with corruption. We are trying to eradicate corruption in Indonesia, for instance. So this is a lot of homework. Yeah, but in general, things going down here. This is a good development, and this is happening in most of ASEAN countries. That's why, because development is very important to us, Yeah, this is actually the core business of foreign policy is economic and development, and this will be the nature of our foreign policy. Remember that we have a contention between between Indo-Pacific, American Indo-Pacific, and Belt and Road Initiative from China, for instance. And then we have so many versions of Indo-Pacific. And then ASEAN come up, yeah, with the Indonesian draft, ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific. What is this ASEAN Outlook Indo-Pacific? That means that we try to cooperate with all kind of scheme, with PRI, with American FOIPs, with Australian, a new policy on the Pacific, with South Korea, look South policy, yeah, with India, SAGAR, and then so this is the nature of ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific: development, cooperation, development, cooperation, development, and cooperation. Nothing more than that. Yeah. So this is the nature of a person, or sorry, a people who wish to move from yellow into green. Yeah. So the stability, development, cooperation is everything. So this is our Indo-Pacific. And this will relate with the situation today. Now, when we build up our Indo-Pacific, the version of ASEAN on Indo-Pacific, ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific, it consists of four pillars of cooperation: maritime, yeah, connectivity, yeah, sustainable development. SDG is very important. It's about health and everything. So all the pandemic is under this pillar, and economic cooperation. So this is the way for us to force ahead, yeah, to cooperate with partners, with China, with United States, yeah, with Australia, all of the important partners that we have, 9 of them in ASEAN, and then we work together within this Indo-Pacific. We are not going to suggest that, okay, every Indo-Pacific version and PRI be blended into one. No. But we would like to have a table in which all the other scheme can be put together and working in synergy by connecting the dots. This is the essential of Indo-Pacific. Now, then, this is our perspective on the security, yeah, during and after COVID. Yeah. So if you look at this row in the top here, this is the most priority, I think. What is this? This is from the World Economic Forum, and they have the annual report on threat perception, whatever you call it. Yeah. And from the last 3-4 years, this never changed. Yeah. They're always in the top as the threat perception. Number one is spread of infectious disease, and we have pandemics today. Now, if you have pandemics, then everything changes. Yeah. From normal traditional commerce into e-commerce. Everyone now is doing e-commerce. Yeah, we don't have a meeting anymore, personal meeting, but now we have a virtual meeting. Then what happened? This is IT based, and this will be the next step. Yeah, in this, and if I would like to enlarge a little bit for you, see this. Infectious disease, pandemics, and then the critical information infrastructure breakdown. You can imagine if everyone running with the IT-based communication, and then it's overload, and it might be we have a critical information infrastructure breakdown one day. This is another threat that we need to think. Yeah. Now, other is water crisis. I think our friend in Australia understand this. You have a bushfire, and every summer mostly we also have bushfire in Indonesia, and water is very important for all of this. Yeah, biodiversity losses, natural disaster. This is the whole things, cyber attack of the threat perception starting from 2020 into 2030 that we need to deal together. How about interstate conflict? Yes, still there, but you see that this is more in the moderate terms, yeah, rather than in the tops. Yeah. The way we look at this is the more you move to the right, yeah, the likelihood is bigger. And if you move from down to up here, that means the impact is big. Yeah, the impact is big. So, for instance, if you look at nuclear weapons, for instance, likelihood is very small because only that part. But when it's happened, the impact is really very, very big. Either this is the disaster or nuclear war. Yeah. Now, this is then when we discuss already on the spread of pandemics in here, and this is the situation today. So you see that Ibu Dyah already mentioned the extent of the pandemics. In America, they have 12 million cases. Europe, they have 4 cases. This is a situation that I think yesterday. Yeah, so this is very current data. Southeast Asia is about 3.7 million. Mediterranean, and then we have Africa and Western Pacific is a half of million. So this is the extent of severity today. So that's why North America will be heavily affected. Yeah, Europe I think is going to recover, but East Asia I think is going to recover first. This is Southeast Asia. Yeah. And this is the impact we already know from the IMF. Yeah, United States economic has been contracted by -8%, but it will recover next year by 4.5. Yeah, this is the situation in Indo-Pacific. Yeah, and then Japan now is like contracting -5.8. Next year it will recover 2.4. And most of the ASEAN countries now is shrinking into -2, but next year we are going to hopefully recover by 6.2%. This is India, China, and so on. So the point is that if you look at this reality of the severity of the COVID, then East Asia is going to recover first, and after that, European Union, and after that, North America, and pretty much perhaps or later on will be Latin American situation. Now the data show exactly like that. So this is, we are monitoring every day from the website. It's called I think Marine Traffic website. They provide you with the data 24 hours a day on the movement of vessels. Yeah. So this is the port of Shanghai, representing largest port in Asia. The port of Singapore and Hong Kong. Look, this is the data from I think 2 weeks ago. So in Shanghai we have 840 departure of vessels and about arrival 1,190 vessels coming. Vessels coming mean export, import, vessel going export, right? And then this is in the port of Singapore. In the port of Singapore we have 1,200 vessels coming, and then 1,200 vessels going, right? And this Hong Kong, almost the same. And this is Amsterdam. Yeah, it is Rotterdam. Yeah, Rotterdam already matched with the situation in Singapore. Amsterdam is a bit lower. And then we have Antwerp, still in Europe. Yeah, so they are ranked second after harbors in Asia. And then we have New Orleans. It is United States. Yeah, now it's only 14 vessels departing and 8 vessels coming. And then this is Tanjung Priok. Yes, this is Jakarta. Yeah. So we still have about 100 come, 100 go today in the Port Klang. Yeah. And this Iran Bandar Abbas. So you can see that from the movement of vessels, this gives you evidence that which economy is kicking and which economy is start to kick and which economy is not yet kicking yet. So and this is very important. So look at the situation now. On the, let's say, Pak Dodi mentioned the situation in the South China Sea. Yeah, this mostly the situation related to domestic situation in the United States and domestic situation in China. Yeah, I don't think they are going to go into open war in the South China Sea because they are poor now. The American economy is contracted by -8%. You're not going to go to war if you don't have money. So China also the same. So I think everyone is going to concentrate on the recovery. But yeah, a low-level contingency has been always in the South China Sea. But America is still deploying asset. China is still deploying asset in the region. So what we really worried is the possibility of accident. Accident like you shoot someone else without just because of accident. Yeah, so this is the things that we are very worried. Now the situation in the United States. This is just like in our index, yeah, fragile state index, yeah. But America is green, remember, so that's why the average is much lower with us, and the rank is much lower from 2 to 6, yeah. But in the last 5 years, I think the last 5 years, I don't want to mention any particular administration, but in the last 5 years, the data show us there is a lot of deteriorating situation. Factionalist elite in America is increasing, group grievance is increasing. They have problem with security apparatus is increasing. I think something to do with black communities shooting and stuff. Yeah, But they also have improvement on the economic inequalities getting better, and then public service getting better. But state legitimacy now is deteriorating a little bit, yeah, in United States. So in this very situation, I think we wish that the leadership can really have control on the foreign policy side, yeah. The brinkmanship foreign policy between China and United States will not help the situation getting better. Yeah, we need a peaceful condition in which everyone can concentrate on the recovery of the economy and also concentrate on how to deal with the pandemic. Yeah. And this is the domestic situation in China. I think you can see that only one or two lines going down. Mostly they are either ups or just flat like this. So this is not really very promising as well. Now, if you look at the situation in China, yeah, from these figures into these figures, it is also very matching. I got this from the UNDP. Just look at this. This is very beautiful data. Yeah, this is annual growth of foreign direct investment stock to China. It's going down. So less investment in China than 10 years ago. This is the situation in 2009. 25% of the investment is foreign direct investment in China, but now it's only 1/3 of it. Yeah? What happened then? Because the labor cost in China has been increasing from, this is the situation 2009, and this is the situation 2018. So the downpouring here is corresponding with the increasing of labor here. And that's why far before the trade war and far before the pandemic, we have already the situation of decreasing export from China to the world. And China export to the world is important because the whole industry in the world depends on the China supply. Yeah, and this is what has been with the situation from 2018. It's already going down. Yeah, and this is the Chinese export to Africa, Chinese export to Latin America. The blue one is to North America. They already going down and from 2018 and before 2018. And the sharp decline here is actually during the pandemic when Wuhan and Hubei was closed down, and then there is no more supply to the world. Yeah. And this creates some kind of awareness, yeah, to the global community that I'm not going to put the whole eggs in the one basket. So some of them would like to relocate from China. And this is the data actually from the polling done by the American Chamber of Commerce. They asked the American company in China, are you going to move out of China? And this is the answer. Very interesting. When we compare the data from 2018 to 2019. Yeah. So in 2018, due to this situation, yeah, about 18% of American company in China is thinking of moving out China. Now, today, 2019, 2020, the number increases. Yeah, 25% are considering movement. Move where? To Asia. Yeah, to move to ASEAN. Yeah, they trust ASEAN. Why? They trust ASEAN because remember we have a zone on peace, freedom, and neutrality. So the company feel happy. Okay, will be more secure to move to ASEAN because the predictability on the foreign policy of most ASEAN countries, they are not going to take side between the war between China and United States, and it's good for business, right? So the fact is that the number of companies going out from China and move to ASEAN is testimony that we are in the right policy, actually. Now, the number of American company which is going to move elsewhere is declining. Yeah, this is 2018. Yeah, that much, about 12%. Now it's down into 8%. Back to United States, I don't think that people are going to go back to some companies, yes, but mostly they are moving to ASEAN. Now, this is the American company that is going to move to Indonesia. I happened to meet one of them and ask them why they are going to move, and then they gave me some explanation like there are many options. They can move to Thailand, so they can move to Vietnam. Vietnam is always a favorite one, but in Indonesia, the market is big. Yeah, the market is big, and then they produce right in the middle of the big market. This is one. And this is the company, 7 of them, with the value of 850 million that are going to move to Indonesia. The process like 90% already, and the other 17 are in the pipeline. Now, the situation of the trade war, for instance, give some countries, mostly ASEAN countries, a windfall. So look at this. Yeah, this is the trade war, tariff duties. Yeah. Now, American imposed tariff to China 24% for the importation of any good from China to United States. Not any good, but certain goods. Sorry. Yeah, and this is mostly on textile and on rubber products. Yeah, 25%. Indonesia, the impose tax or duty only 16%, but we need to compete with Vietnam because they impose the same level of tax between Indonesia and Vietnam. Is much lower than China. Yeah. This is also the case on the, let's say, on rubber product. Yeah, 0 tariff for Indonesia, 0 tariff for Malaysia, and 7.5% to China. So that's why we are now Indonesia, Vietnam, and Malaysia competing for American market. So during the pandemic, actually, rather than have decreasing export, our export to United States increased by 1 to 2%. But Vietnam increased even higher. Yeah. So this is the windfall. Yeah. So this is also the case since the disruption of supply from China into Asia. So we managed to improve our export on automotive to Vietnam, to Thailand, to Japan, and also to the Philippines. This is the windfall that we are looking and try to exploit. So another couple of two more slides left. But if we start opening the economy while we still have the pandemic, then the risk will be on the labor forces. They are exposed by the pandemic. But without that, we cannot steal the time for recovery. That's why the vaccine will be very important for Indonesia. And Pak Dodi clearly mentioned that we are hunting for vaccine. Is it part of our foreign policy? Now, that's what happened. We have 2 strategies. The first one, we have cooperation with foreign partners. That's why Ibu Menlu, our minister, was in Shanghai and in United Arab Emirates. They are talking on the cooperation between Bio Farma from Indonesia and Sinovac Biotech from China for vaccine. And with United Arab Emirates, we are talking on the cooperation between Kimia Pharma, Indopharma, and G42 Healthcare from United Arab Emirates, also for vaccine. And we already have some early purchase of vaccine of 40 million dosage will be arriving in Indonesia by the end of the year, so we can start to show. While in Indonesia, the clinical trial is now still going on, and hopefully by the end of the year we can complete it, and the domestic production of vaccine might be started in the first semester of next year. But before that, we already secure some supply from abroad. Yeah? And this was the reason why we have more cooperation with United Arab Emirates for vaccine and for China. But at the same time, we also engaging in this, I think, in the second clinical trial already with Genesin, from South Korea. So we working very hard in terms of foreign policy for vaccine with China, South Korea, United Arab Emirates, and to some extent, we also seeking possible cooperation with United Kingdom and United States as well. Yeah. So this is the short-term strategy for vaccine to help the economic recovery in Indonesia. Long term, we create our own vaccine. So we set up the National Consortium for Vaccine Development, and it consists of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Industry, Ministry of State-Owned Enterprises, and Agency of Drug and Food Control. So hopefully, but this might take longer times. I think Eijkman is spearheading the process, and they in the early stage now, but the vaccine might be available in 2022. Yeah. So and this is the situation in Indonesia today. Yeah. So actually, in dealing with pandemic, there are always 3 strategies. The first one is discipline of the community, wearing masks every day, social distancing, and so on, which is very difficult now. And we try to push on the community to really, really pay attention on that. Yeah. Number two is on the vaccine. Either we build up our own capacity to have our own vaccine or cooperation with foreign partners. And number three is on the treatment. Now, this is the situation now, and because we don't have vaccine yet. Yeah, this is the new cases in Indonesia. We are still talking about 2,000 new cases, 1,500 until 2,000 new cases every day for the whole Indonesia. But this is the blue one. The green one is the number of recovery. Yeah. Now the percentage of recovery in Indonesia is 72%. It's increased tremendously. Before 5 months ago, it's only 15%. But now we managed to have 72.1, and hopefully in the coming months, when treatment is getting better and so on, and the society becoming more disciplined, the pressure to the hospital is less, then perhaps we can increase by 80% recovery percentage. Yeah, and this is the temporary treatment, temporary measures against COVID. Only improving discipline of the people, wearing masks and so on, social distancing, and improving the treatment in the hospital. Yeah. So this is the summary now. Our foreign policy. Number one, economic diplomacy, meaning hunting for windfall. Yeah. So despite of difficulties because of the recession pressure on our export, we managed to increase some export in several countries. Yeah, and then we try to start to produce more LTD, limited trade deal, with some particular countries. This is not PTA, but this is very practical. Only certain commodities, but we make a deal. Give us 0% tariff. I give you 0% tariff. Only on certain number of commodity, not much, but this is very helpful. Number two is health diplomacy. I mentioned already about vaccine, health industry, on medicine and so on. That this is the center point of our foreign policy now. And last but not least is our agenda. So this year, 2020, we very still busy with multilateralism, but you know that multilateralism is under pressure. Indonesia is still in United States Security Council now as non-permanent member. We also in UN Human Rights Commission and ECOSOC. This is we try to help others working together to have what Pak Dodi mentioned on the alliance of multilateralism. This is the UN staff, and that's why we are engaging in the three important body of the UN Security Council, Human Rights Council, and ECOSOC. Next year, Indo-Pacific year, we are going to have World Economic Forum on ASEAN, particularly on the ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific, and particular about the project of connectivity and infrastructure next year in Indonesia. This will be summit. Yeah, a lot of we invite the head of states and the ministers, yeah, and big companies. 2022 we will be chair of ASEAN Summit. I think the agenda remains on the recovery and COVID. 2023 we will be chairing G20. One of the agenda I think in our side will be on the e-commerce. Yeah. And then 2024 we will be chair of APEX. So that's I think the summary of how we deal with the situation in the region, increasing tension between the United States and China, for instance, and how to deal with the pandemics and preparing for the recovery as well, and what is the main agenda for our foreign policy in the next 5 years from now. Yeah. I think I had to stop here. So I'm sorry and apologize if we take too much of your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Siswo, for the interesting and comprehensive presentation. And I believe that your presentation will quite provoking for the audience, and so they can also raise questions for you later. And now I would like to invite the speaker from University of Indonesia, Dr. Philosophy Yandry Kurniawan. Dr. Kurniawan is a lecturer and editor-in-chief of Global Journal Politik International at the Department of International Relations, as well as senior researcher, board of trustee member at the Abdurrahman Wahid Center for Peace and Humanity, Universitas Indonesia. He is an international security enthusiast with interest in international relations and security studies in Asia, as well as a security cooperations and institution building in Southeast Asia. Dr. Kurniawan, you have 15 minutes to present your ideas on the theme of the seminar, and now the screen is yours.
Thank you, Budia. I would like to share my slides first. Budia, could you help me to confirm? Is the slide is there?
Yeah, we can see your slide, Pak Yandry. Please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to warmly thank the Policy Analysis and Development Agency of Ministry of Foreign Affairs Republic Indonesia, and also Department of International Relations for hosting this webinar, and also for presenting me this an opportunity to be here today in this prestigious occasion. I would also like to greet Pak Siswo and fellow panelists. Good morning to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues. So this is the title of my presentation. This is totally accidentally happened. Pak Siswo make a very optimistic presentation from the political landscape, but my presentation is totally in the opposite side. Then I will present like a more like a realist, pessimist realism overview of the situation today. So along the presentation, every now and then I will return to some academic textbook. I think it will be good providing us some perspective, and more importantly for me, it will also help keeping my perspective in check. And also due to the time constraint, probably I will not elaboratively discuss every point in my slides. Probably we could dig deeper during the Q&A session later on. I would like to start with these slides. This simple information is against the conventional wisdom of the day about the COVID-19. Like most of the conventional wisdom of the day is saying that COVID-19 is unprecedented. But if we look at this brief information, in 2004, U.S. National Intelligence Council report said that another large-scale event that we believe could stop globalization, a pandemic. 2014, President Obama said that if and when a new strain of flu, like a Spanish flu, crop up in 5 years from now, 5 years from 2014, that's mean COVID-19. Or a decade from now, we have made an investment. It is knowing that down the road, we are going to continue to have this problem. And then in 2015, Nature Medicine, a leading academic journal in this field, published an article mentioning that a cluster of SARS-type coronavirus exhibits potential for emergence in humans. Prior to that, in 2012, Kamrat Scott and McInnes published an article in Global Public Health titled The Securitization of Pandemic Influenza. They write, Western government launched initiatives aimed at developing and testing national pandemic influenza measures. Plans were developed using scenarios supported by epidemic modeling and clinical attack rates, often based on the 1918 pandemic, to predict the extent of projected human morbidity and mortality. So the source story tells us that the world leaders knew that the pandemic was going to happen. They knew that they had to create tools to deal with pandemic, not necessarily prevent it. They have to know, and we are talking about some very powerful person who have a large number of international power share at their disposal. A large number of international power shares is huge power. We are talking about some person who have their finger legitimately on the button of nuclear weapons. So they have to know. And if we look back to the history of WHO, It was created in 1948, right after the World War II, in order to deal with the influenza because of the Spanish flu experience in 1940, 1918 and 1919. But here we are today. I think Acharya posed the best statement describing the irony of our time. In terms of dealing with pandemic, the world barely moved from 1200 years ago. WHO best advice when pandemic broke out was wash your hand and close your mouth when coughing and sneezing. After almost two-thirds of century, almost 75 years, and spent billion of dollars. Even WHO wasn't even able to really decide in the early days whether to wear or not to wear a mask. So that is the global health governance we are having in the onset. Now, I would like to move to this timeline. This timeline shows us a very brief history of the wars in the World War II. Those 5 critical junctures in the world history present as 4 periods where each of them has its own unique themes and characters. Soon after the World War II international system entered the Cold War, the main character of this period was a bipolar stability and period of long peace in the West. After the end of the Cold War, some writers call the period as Pax Americana, unipolar international system with the US as the sole superpower of the world. The character of this period may be best described by Fukuyama's End of History and The Last Man, and also Huntington's classic book, The Clash of Civilization. Next, moving to the new millennium, we have 9/11 tragedy. The world entered a period of war on terror. Unilateralism emerged to the surface of international politics, and that was the era where the state and non-state actors fought protected wars. Only 7 years from after the 9/11, the world suffered global financial crisis. It caused great recession in US and European debt crisis. In the other part of the world, there was Arab Spring. It renewed violent conflict from the North Africa all the way to the Middle East. Unsurprisingly, of course, it caused huge number of migration, especially to the European continent, while the European countries had not done yet with their economic problem. Then we witnessed the rise of right-wing movement across Europe, both at the political elite and the grassroots level. Quickly fly to the other part of the world, we have trans-Pacific hegemonic rivalry involving US and China. So maybe Pak Siswo has mentioned it before. It's still fresh in our mind that US-China trade war was on the peak just slightly before the COVID-19. Then now we have a global lockdown. Now, so COVID-19 appeared when the reactionary nationalism and populist leaders are in power. Values of cooperation and mutual aid were no longer relevant. So the very world greatest power that once established, led and maintained and enlarged the world order, now they try their best to tear the order apart. So if we want to put an analogy here, or visualization probably, so the middle and small powers in the world system seek to enhance multilateralism and international cooperation. But great powers try their best to move away from that multilateralism and international cooperation. We have United States, we have the UK, and the Brexit. So, in line of this logic, I'm tempted to twist the title of Francis Fukuyama books. Are we now entering the end of history, the second, and no more men? So no, or This is a time for Mersheimer's classic from 1994 that the false premise of international institutions speak louder than ever. What I'm trying to say is the traditional world power and international institutions are absent and irrelevant in international cooperation fighting COVID-19. And to the best of my limited knowledge, both as a person and student of international relations, nowadays is the first precedent that international system is so leaderless in the face of global threat. Responding to balkanization, for instance, for better or worse, Bill Clinton led NATO and forced the warring parties to go to the peace talk. During the ASEAN final crisis, we saw Washington consensus institutions trying to control the situation. 9/11, Bush Jr. led the global war on terror. 2008 global crisis, we had Germany, France, European Union, and other international financial institutions handle situation. Now we have COVID-19, and there almost nothing in order. So this is the international cooperation as we speaking now. And it is in my intention to put that picture there and put the word solidarity and cooperation above it. Solidarity and cooperation used to be like the essential, the cardinal mantra of the establishment of the European Union. And now look at the European Union. When the Southern European hit worse by the COVID-19, and we are not seeing oftenly the Northern and Western European sending their men and women in service to the other part of the Europe. Now, of course, there is no doubt that COVID-19 is a non-traditional security threat. Those are some basic features of non-traditional security threat. So obviously, COVID-19 is not a state entity. COVID-19 is the most asymmetric thing that we can imagine. We know almost nothing about it. It is spreading widely across states' border, and Pak Siswo has mentioned it before, Dyah has mentioned it before. No debate, it kills human. As we are speaking today, almost 900,000 people have died. So, and scholars of international security are in general agreement that the best way to deal with non-traditional security would be international cooperation. To be effective, international cooperation needs international regime and institution. This is a very basic liberalism, like 101 liberalism in study of international relations. Why we need international cooperation? Because those features of non-traditional security, it cross border, it doesn't hit directly states, but the very significant entity within the state. Now, having mentioned that, now if it wants to deeply and seriously involve in the international cooperation on health security, in my opinion, it would be the best for Indonesia to focus on this mandala. Indonesia at the center of the mandala, Southeast Asia region, next to the inner circle, and then at top we work on the Asia Pacific region. We can call it mandala, we can call it concentric circle, or even borrowing Jürgen Habermas' word, this is a Lebensraum. If you want to use the word Lebensraum, we have to refer to Habermas. Otherwise, Hitler also used this word, and it ended with one of the greatest disasters to humanity. And after all, like international relations theories from Mersheimer all the way to Barry Buzan, underline and suggest that states should focus on its neighborhood. So, if Indonesia could initiate development the specific forum in which security professional of ASEAN member states and other regional health actors can interface effectively. To do so, maybe would like to look at, for example, the concept of regional leadership, like offered by this framework, regional power and security framework. There are at least 5 stages that Indonesia need to pay attention if we really want to initiate the development of such a forum. But before going abroad, it will be best to bear in mind that foreign policy begins at home. Like I heard those words firstly from Mas Bantarto Bandoro, the late and the great Bantarto Bandoro. So I keep referring to him as a student manners to his teacher. So will it serve our national interest to initiate development of such a forum? If yes, how it would serve our national interest? For sure, such a forum would be much more than joint statement, joint declaration, and as such. Now, this is the idea of the forum that I have in my mind right now. This is totally intellectual exercise. I have no like a very strong argument or like a very elaborative data, but this is for the sake of intellectual exercise. So that forum should be able to put existing forums, mechanism, and else the existing forums and mechanism. And then this forum should transform the existing ASEAN Coordinating Center for Humanitarian Assistance into something like a bicameral one. So within the HAA, we should have a Center for Natural Disaster there and also Center for Pandemic Crisis. Like we are Southeast Asia, we are living in the middle of the ocean. Indonesia is the greatest archipelagic state in the world. Indonesia is the country with the most, maybe if please correct me if I'm wrong, like the highest number of volcanoes in the world. So I mean, like natural disaster and pandemic crisis will always, like Obama said, we will always have these problems. So, and probably if we work on these two areas, natural disaster and of course learning from the COVID-19, the level of cooperation will be more institutionalized, given that health is often seen as a neutral, such can be feasible when the relationship building is difficult by other means. So, I mean, like, for the sake of arguments, like pandemic has no sovereignty, pandemic has no national territory, so it should not have so many sensitivity when we cooperate on health. So this would be my last presentation. All those being said, my greatest concern as student of international security that COVID-19 and other kind of pandemic would lead us to a false alarms of non-traditional security threat that non-traditional security pose biggest clear and present danger in the contemporary international politics and push traditional security aside to the periphery of international security narratives. I mean, like, please don't take me wrong. I do not undermine the clear and present danger of COVID-19 other pandemics. States have to make the maximum efforts, mobilize the resource, break the normal political rule of game as suggested by security situation theory, deploy extraordinary measures, and take down this COVID-19 and make sure it will not rebound once and for good. However, I follow suit of Mercier line of logic that COVID-19, plague, pandemics, disease, or whatever else we like to call it, will not end hegemonic rivalry and great power politics will remain to dominate international system. We are witnessing like another tragedy of great power politics is happening in our neighborhood as US-China Cold War is at the onset. So with that, I end my presentation. Thank you very much and stay healthy for everyone. Thank you, Udia.
Thank you, Pak Yandry, for the interesting, also provoking presentation. And now, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed to the next speaker, I would like to remind you that if you have any question or concerns, you could write it on the Q&A in the Zoom, or maybe through the chat room through YouTube. And after all the presentation, we will open the discussion or question and answer sessions. And our next speaker is Dr. Shafiah F. Muhibat, or we usually call her Ibu Fifi. Thank you for joining us, Ibu Fifi. Dr. Muhibat is the head of Department of International Relations, Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS Indonesia. She was recently a senior fellow at the Maritime Security Program as Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Singapore from January to December 2017. She has done and taken part in extensive research projects on politics and regional securities in the Southeast Asia and the Asia Pacific since 2000s. And she has special interest in issues of regional security in East Asia, maritime security, Indonesia foreign policy, and regional cooperations. Ibu Fifi also the chief editor of the Indonesian Quarterly, a quarterly academic journal published by CSIS. And previously, she obtained her master's degree from London School of Economic and Political Science and have her PhD in Political Science from University of Hamburg. So Ibu Fifi, you have also 15 minutes or until maximum 20 minutes to share your idea about the theme of this seminar. The screen is yours, Ibu Fifi.
Thank you, Ibu Dyah, for the kind introduction. Selamat pagi, very good morning to everyone, Pak Siswo, Pak Dodi, and all the other fellow panelists. It's a pleasure for me to be part of this very interesting webinar this morning. I think we're talking about issues that are very important. Everybody talks about COVID-19 these days, but I think we also realize that the impact of COVID-19 is very multi-dimensional. So I think it's very important that we also discuss, the sort of like the political security impacts of COVID-19 as well. Let me just based on the terms of reference that was given to me by the organizers, one of the big questions of this webinar this morning is asking about the global political security landscape in the midst and post-COVID-19. So with this question, there's already an assumption that there is significant change, that COVID-19 is indeed a game changer, including in political security landscape. And with this assumption, then comes the following question, which is, how do we respond to this? If there are significant impacts in terms of political security from COVID-19, then how do we respond to this? So I'll try to be, I'll try to make my presentation as simple as possible, so I don't take much time. But I'll start off with, questioning this geopolitical transformation caused by COVID-19. Is there really, transformation caused specifically by COVID-19? And then try to maybe portray a little bit of characteristics of the landscape in terms of COVID-19 and then the impact for it. And I think for the last part, specifically talking about, what is it, what are the impacts directly for Indonesia and what do we do? I think I'd like to invite this for, more discussion with the other panelists and participants as well. So basically, asking the question, is COVID-19 a game changer? Does it bring about significant impacts in terms of political security? I'm pretty sure if you ask everyone, everyone will say yes. There has been a lot of opinions put forth, what the impacts are. A World Economic Forum has said that this is a crisis like no other. We have never experienced something as huge as COVID-19, which impacts, like I said, the impacts are multidimensional. It's going to be seen as a chapter break in the history book. I'm not sure, I can't imagine 10, 20 years from now what the history book would look like when describing, the year 2020. Especially, there's going to be a lot of updates in terms of the academic readings we have in international relations. This is going to be something that that is, seen as a really a game changer in terms of international politics. This is interesting. So we are assuming that there are significant changes. CSIS, my institute, we did an expert survey, I think throughout the month of July, I think starting off the end of June throughout the month of July. This is quite interesting, and I do have to put a disclaimer here that this survey is not yet released. My directors and I are talking about releasing this at the end of this month, if not the latest, beginning of September. But I'm given permission to show a little bit of snippets on what was the result of the expert survey. So we surveyed over 200 of experts from throughout the world, asking questions related to geopolitics and economics. And one of the questions that was asked in this survey is that COVID-19 is accelerating structural changes to the global order in the form of. So you can see that the majority of the respondents say that there is a significant decline of multilateralism and the rise of unilateral actions, while more than 40% says that there is increasing severity of strategic rivalries. And then there is going to be, or is already occurring, hegemonic transition from the US to China. And only 2.9% say that there is no changes at all. So, COVID-19, business as usual in terms of how states interact. I think this portrays, that, giving agreement to our earlier assumption, that COVID-19 is bringing about structural changes to the global order, with various of issues. But in terms of geopolitics, there are significant changes that is, that we can see brought about, especially in terms of how states now prefer or choose to have actions that is seen more unilateral rather than multilateral. So, so I think this gives an overall background on how there are significant global changes that we are facing at the moment. Now, given that as a background, you talk about COVID-19 and you think of the medical sector. Of course, we see on a daily basis, we follow the news of how many people are infected, the issues about the vaccine and everything related to the medical sector. But in terms of non-medical sector, we see at least 4 points that I'm quoting this from the OECD report from 2020, just I think released just at least a couple of months ago. The first one is that it's really about the restriction of movement. So this is the restriction of movement means that the way people conduct their daily lives have significantly changed. And I think when we see it at the bigger picture, then how states also conduct their business also change. Furthermore, due to health risks, extra protocols are needed. Again, behaviors change, how people interact change. Meanwhile, labor are less available. And then, in our everyday life, COVID-19 had limited the flow of end-to-end processes. Again, so, implications, if you see it from a micro perspective, it really changes the way people live their lives. But I guess if you try to pull it to seeing it at a bigger picture and how states interact, the same implications also occur. This is what I was talking about. So when the changes are seen, in terms of restrictions to human, interaction, it presents foundational changes. Now we see less human experience in decision-making process. absence of direct meetings, a lot of very important meetings, important negotiations are put on hold or have to change or have to shift to virtual meetings. It contributes to the lack of, transfer of emotions or information between state representatives. Less meeting, less interaction, and there is less information exchange between state representatives. And therefore, this would, of course, then have, for those, studying perception in international relations, when you have, lack of transfer of emotions and information, that significantly impact on the perception, how states view one another. Leaders will be susceptible to self-interpret the goals, the attitude of their rivals, because less information given. What states leaders can do is only interpret what the others are trying to achieve, what their goals are, what their desires are, what their national interests are. And in this case, diplomacy will be harder. The second one is that resources for foreign affairs will be limited. This has been discussed in various webinars, I think, since the break of COVID-19, how states are exhausting their resources for domestic needs to respond to COVID-19 within their own country, which means that resources for foreign affairs will be limited. And leaders are also, not only in terms of physical or monetary resources, but also in terms of focus and attention. And leaders will be focused domestically, both on responding to the crisis and also defending the way they handle the crisis. So I think these are 2 points where I see these are the continuation or the consequences of the changes that is experienced at the people-to-people interaction will also then have consequences in terms of state-to-state interaction. Now, then looking at the previous 2 slides, then we can try to analyze what the possible trends and characteristics of the global political security landscape in the midst of COVID-19 that we are experiencing now, or maybe try to project in the future post-COVID-19. Unfortunately, none of us know when the post-COVID-19 era will begin, hopefully sooner than later. First, you talk about grievance from crisis. As the amount of loss from crisis, is certain. People lose their jobs. Countries have, economic crisis and so on. It's interesting to try to analyze, what the implications for the political security landscape. Economically weakened countries may adopt contentious, aggressive foreign policy because they're, exhausting their resources. They might not have the necessary resources to conduct their usual foreign policy. So they may adopt, other forms of foreign policy. In this case, hostility can be a recurring sentiment. Particularly over the manner, you can see from the manner of the outbreak first in China. Countries play the blame game, instead of resorting to working together, to cooperation, to multilateral efforts. Countries, we remember back in February, March, April, countries play the blame game. They try to seek compensation. So these are the kinds of options that they have left because so very little resources are left for them to spend on having their usual manner of foreign policy. And I guess this when countries feel they have crisis and then they grieve over it, it may to a certain extent alter the way they conduct their foreign policy. The second part is the change in the degree of foreign involvements. What I mean by this is related to the previous slide when I talk about exhausting resources domestically. The big question here is that will the pandemic increase the awareness that domestic well-being is influenced by development abroad? there will be, spending cuts will change the balance of presence outside the country. Again, back to resources issues. For major power like the U.S., this has great consequences because it relates to their capacity to sustain military campaign away from the homeland. Including to curb pandemic outbreak. There will be less and less ability of major powers to spend their resources in helping the least developed states in terms of helping them to curb pandemic outbreak. And then foreign affairs will also be guided by less strategic overview and more on pragmatic and tactical hindsight. So this relates to the first bubble here as well. Less strategic overview, more on pragmatic tactical hindsights. Interactions, we already see interactions that is more transactional, and this is dictated by the question of what we can afford instead of the ideal what we aim to do. So all of this planning on how the national interests in the long run, what we aim to do, what a certain country seeks to achieve, is now being replaced on what can we afford at the moment. The third part is sensitivities over territories and control. The pandemic, brought forward the old idea, the politics of population. With this pandemic now, we have seen governments assert more control over their population and territory. We see in a lot of cases, higher capacity for surveillance is a key security theme. Including the use of technologies such as artificial intelligence to combat the spread of the disease. So this then, brings about another level of concerns over sensitive issues over territories and control, which also means that there is now the return of the role of big government, as they are, as part of responding to the pandemic. The role of a big government overseeing a lot of meticulous issues over the population. They are called upon to oversee, track, and constrain the movement of their population and provide them with help and economic support. In terms of international security, we have seen increasing sensitivity over the control of movements in the border. We see skirmishes between neighbors, such as the one in the border of India and China. And the trend is likely to be consequential to displaced persons and refugees. I've attended a few of webinars talking about the issue of displaced persons and refugees during the COVID-19 pandemic, and this is, I think, a whole different dimension of challenge as well. The fourth issue here is the increasing sources of vulnerabilities. We see that the fragility of the situation and disturbance to normal life will likely trigger protests. We see protests is in a lot of countries, including in countries where we thought that the democratic process has been occurring in a stable manner. We see increasingly scenarios where violent protests from suffering are faced with police crackdowns and repressions. We see wave of migrations as well, and struggling governments may either be busy to care for domestic needs rather than ventures outside of the country. So these are, I'll show you I think this is a map of vulnerabilities. I took this from the World Food Program. You see, this map of hunger represents one way of observing alerts over potentially vulnerable areas to instability and conflict. The last point here is what I call the push and pull between forces of globalization and deglobalization. Well, there are countries who, have committed to keep in this case, we hear this a lot since the pandemic, the global supply chain alive. There is also trend of regionalization or even localization of supply chain. When, the pandemic has proved that the global supply chain has actually one of the most unstable feature that we have as part of globalization. So now there is also a trend of regionalization and localization of supply chain, especially among countries with the capacity to do so. There are possibilities that globalization will be increasingly regulated. Government's role will likely come out stronger than the forces of market, which is something that is quite contradictory to our usual or common understanding of how globalization function. And localization means that might be stronger nationalist impulses. We already see this in terms of vaccine. A lot of cries from all corners of the world, please do not make COVID-19 vaccine a nationalist agenda, of any country. It should be, public goods available to all countries in the world. But trends of deglobalization then actually make it very likely that a number of states would have strong nationalist impulses, which means that the term of international community that we have held for the longest time might have less relevance in the current situation. So basically, these are the possible trends and characteristics, again, as a consequence of the different the changes brought about by COVID-19. I guess in a nutshell, this is the whole of the ideas that I presented in the previous slides. Basically, COVID-19 forced countries to think of ways to be less interdependent. Again, nationalist sentiment, trying to deal with each other in a more local, if not regional. As an extension, there may be a change in the sphere of influence of major powers, recalibration of interactions in time of COVID-19. Then this made more momentum to the great power decoupling between the US and China. And lastly, rising tensions are appearing in major hotspots around the region, alerting the possibility of waves of crisis after health and economic. So now COVID-19, first health issues, then economic issues. If it goes on with the trends and characteristics as I've tried to explain in the previous slide, there might also be rising tensions appearing in major hotspots around the region. We're talking about the Indo-Pacific here, but I think it applies to a lot of other regions as well, from domestic conflict to border conflict, which could then trigger crisis related to the movement of people. Now, what are the lessons for the region? So we'll try to think of this. We try to see our immediate region where we are. I quote this from an interesting article from Richard Haas, published in the Foreign Affairs very recently. He says that the big picture remains relatively the same as to before the pandemic. So you talk about all of these changes. I talked about the decrease of multilateralism, increase of unilateralism. But I think if you see it in a bigger picture, these changes have already been occurring before the COVID-19. At least since 1 decade ago. There are already complaints about how the multilateral system that we have now, the UN, the WTO, is actually a very aging multilateral system that needs to be reformed and so on. So this sentiment towards, a mistrust towards multilateralism have actually been occurring since at least 10, 20 years ago. Waning American leadership, lack of global leadership has also been occurring, at least in the last 5 years, if you see the recent policies of the US government. Faltering global cooperation, great power discourse. Again, so here the key narrative remains the same, disarray. This is not something new. This is already something that's been occurring. But what COVID-19 has changed in terms of this is that the extent of such disarray. And I think this is something that's also interesting that if we look at. I'll go to the next slide. Back to the CSIS survey, if we see. again, disclaimer that the survey has not been released yet. We also put a question, so do you think that the structural changes to the global order, so the previous slide that I showed you that the number of issues people, the experts think that will change, will be temporary or permanent? It seems that in general, the opinions of the experts are split, of it being, 44% seeing it permanent, but more than half of the experts see as it being, merely temporary. So the changes have actually occurred over the last decade or so, as I said. Yes, it has been intensified by the COVID-19, but then, it seems that more than half of the experts are optimistic that these structural changes are only temporary, which means that, post-COVID-19, the structural changes might, revert back to the ways that were before. So I guess this is one way, you're projecting way to the future, seeing how things are now in the midst of the pandemic. But there are also opinions that, projects that might be, this might only be temporary. For example, the US might currently just having a hiccup with their, lack of global leadership, might change in the future. We're waiting to see, the US is going to have a new president, how it's going to interact with China in the future. So I guess, there are some questions here that I think quite interesting to analyze. Okay, lastly, so I guess the big question, I think this is also put in the terms of reference for Indonesia. I'd love to discuss this with the other panelists and also the other participants. But I think, we're talking about the whole of, challenges created by COVID, challenges created, by the whole changes towards the political security landscape. But I suppose, there are certain principles that still adhere for, by Indonesia. And Indonesia should be a driver and defender of the principles and conditions it deems important in safe interactions in the region. International law, uninterrupted trade, Southeast Asian unity. So these are at least the three principles that is significant for Indonesia. As long as, the impacts of COVID-19 do not really change the way that, these three principles are practiced in the region immediate to us, then Indonesia, is still in a very good position to try to be a driver and defender of these, principles. My very last slide, just an epilogue, I think, and also a question I'd like to throw to the webinar today. Will the crisis trigger a commitment to international order? With more powers distributed among the players, like I said, lack of global leadership, decoupling among the major powers, more powers are now available to be distributed among the players. Consensus is harder to achieve. Trend of decreasing multilateral is related to this. Then, will the crisis trigger commitment to international order? Seeing it from Indonesia, looking at statements from the government, Indonesia keeps saying that we are committed to international order, but what happens when your partners, the countries in the immediate region, are having problems fulfilling their commitment to international order? Then how do we respond to that? I'll stop with these questions, and hopefully we can discuss more later on in the discussion. Thank you so much. I hand back to you, Ibu Dyah.
Thank you, Bu Fifi. Wow, it's an interesting presentation, Bu. It's more provoking also to be discussed in our institution later. By the way, we still have another two speakers from Charles Darwin University. I believe that Professor Wayne Cristaudo and Dr. Nathan Franklin will be presented together. So I will just read the CV, both of you. Professor Wayne Cristaudo is Professor of Political Science in College of Indigenous Studies, Art and Social Studies. He appointed as the Professor in Politics at Charles Darwin University in 2012. And previously, he was the Associate Professor and Coordinator for the European Studies program at the University of Hong Kong. He is editor of several journals, such as a Journal of the European Legacy Toward New Paradigm, published by Routledge, Journal Culture, Theory and Critique, published by Taylor and Francis, and also Routledge Culture, Society, Business in the East Asia series. And the other speaker from Charles Darwin University is Dr. Nathan Franklin. Dr. Franklin is an Indonesianist with expertise in Indonesian politics, Indonesian language. He teaches Indonesian language and Indonesian politics at Charles Darwin University. He has been served as coordinator and resident director at the Kupang and Lombok in-country language program. And he also have quite a lot of research interests, including in Indonesian politics and political Islam, mainstream Islamic movement, and radical jihadi movement, as well as Indonesian language and culture. And I believe since our fellow speaker from Australia have quite interesting in Indonesian situation at the moment, so their presentation will be also interesting to all the participants. So I would like to invite Professor Cristaudo and then followed by Dr. Franklin to deliver your presentation. Please, Professor, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Am I on?
Just ask, can everyone hear me?
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Clear.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and thank you very much. I can't see that. First of all, I want to focus upon three things in this talk, and that is the occasion of opportunity that comes with the crisis, or the opportunity of the crisis. So that leads me to think about who are the beneficiaries of this crisis. So this is an opportunity for which major players, and the other important part of this talk for me is what I see as what is happening in the United States as hitherto was the superpower in the global context. But I saw one of the other speakers that spoke about the transition to China, and in some ways I have come to that position without wanting necessarily to come to that, or thinking I would come to that. And that also has to do with the role of the elite, the global elite, and globalization. So that's going to be an important part of what I'm saying. So let's just take it back a step. Oh, and one other thing, sorry. When I think of what the simple answer to the question about COVID-19 is, does it make a difference, or does it just bring out problems that are already there? I would have to say it's definitely in the latter group. That is, that there are all these forces in operation playing themselves out both globally and regionally, and then you throw a contingency like COVID-19 into the mix, and how the response to that occurs is going to be very much dictated to by these other forces that are in motion, and the opportunities, as I said, that would be created by that. Now, if I think of the geopolitics of the globe, I think most people would agree, or everybody would agree really, that the Middle East is like the great maw. What comes out of there just keeps swirling around. It is akin to what the Balkans was like at beginning in the First World War, and it's been this way for quite a long time. And of course, Obama tried to reset the alignments that were occurring. He had a number of reasons for doing that, and I think there's no simple answer to what is the best or the worst solution to that. I think as you talk it through, you see each response comes with a whole set of a big tail of problems. And of course, one of the big tail problems that came out of not only Obama's policy, but the policy preceding him under George Bush, was the rise of ISIS. And that was occurring in the context of all these other regional hegemonic aspirants. So I think that in terms of the geopolitical focus where it's been for such a long time, It is what is happening in the Middle East, attempts to try and deal with that. And ultimately, you could say the failure of the United States as a hegemon to be able to deal with that. And I think that had a lot to do with also the decision with the incumbent president to try and get out of that. Not easy to do. And at the same time, we saw that Russia moves into that vacuum, and Russia, its relationship with Iran and with China, we start to see this other block that forms in and of itself, but the opportunity in the Middle East is also going to be very important in that formation. And of course, Iran, given the Sunni problem that both the Russians and the Chinese have, having Iran as an ally makes a lot of sense. And Turkey's role in this as an aspirant in the region, along with Iran being another aspirant, Saudis being another aspirant in the region, their alignment, and interestingly, Turkey moving towards Russia and China and Iran, but also it's got a foot in NATO. So it's in a very difficult position, but it brings out also the fact that none of the aspirants for hegemony in the region have any likelihood of success. But when COVID comes into it, and I didn't want to leave COVID out of it altogether when I was talking about this part of the issue, but when COVID comes into it, it does seem that there's no winners for states, except when I get to the end, possibly China. But otherwise, I think states are caught up in something, they're on the back foot, and they've got only to lose. Because if they're victorious, people will just expect that they did their job, that a job is there to provide security and safety. So if it goes bad, then they're really in trouble, the elite's in trouble. If they deal with it, there's still a big cost in dealing with it. So it's a lose-lose situation for states, but it's not a lose-lose situation for non-state actors. So for any terrorist group or people still attached to ISIS, even if it's just, not really existent anymore, but as an idea, Al-Qaeda as an idea, this is a potential opportunity. Exactly how it will play out, difficult to say. Okay, but they can only benefit from this regional chaos. And there is the regional chaos, of course, is just one more thing coming from COVID, how to deal with this. Let me move now to the US. The US has been in a cultural revolution for 2 generations. The election of President Trump brought to the fore the extent of the factions of this revolution. And so when COVID comes along, it's not something in and of itself. It's basically what is going to be used within this conflict. And that's exactly what it has become. Because again, I think if you look at the US, well, I'll be very blunt. I don't think any government quite knows what to do. This is really unprecedented. And they're all copying each other. And in copying each other, they all are hoping that someone gets it right. And if they've got it right, then they're safe. But if they don't get it right, then they can always say, well, no one got it right. And in part, being a democracy fuels this problem because there has to be responsiveness. But of course, you can't be responsive to everybody. So you end up being responsive to the various groups that have some kind of institutional authority and articulation, that point of view becomes cemented. So this is very closely related to the nature of the elites. And of course, that is precisely what the Cultural Revolution in the United States, and to some extent, it's has also been the case in, one of your speakers mentioned Brexit, in Western Europe, in Australia. So it's a similar kind of phenomenon, that what we're witnessing is a mismatch between elites in Western developed countries and other members of the population. We could say the urban professionals and those that aren't part of that group. So COVID really plays into that. It's one more thing too, in which there's leverage given to the specialist, to the expert, again, the professional, to their narrative. And as that intensifies, that authority intensifies, naturally they become very critical of people that don't share that point of view. And a lot of people don't share the point of view, don't share the narrative about all manner of things. And at the same time, the state has to act. So it needs someone to make a decision, and then it needs cooperation, it needs compliance. And this is COVID, in a sense, for the elite is a gift. People in the bureaucracy, many of them will not lose their jobs, though universities have been affected in Australia in part because of its dependency upon Chinese students, etc. But this further intensifies the need of the elite to make sure that there's conformity with the narrative, which only fuels the civil war component, because other people hate this. They feel that they have no say in what is going on. So in this respect, I think COVID-19 is one more element in an already ongoing process of the state being seen as a technocratic instrument, which requires then the cultivation of technocrats, but it also requires narrative conformity, which also requires another set of professionals to ensure that that conformity takes place. So in a sense, it's not very different at one level to something like global warming, except of course, where it is different, that is, it's not different insofar as you have a technocratic elite, the importance in terms of garnering funding to analyze the situation, to come up with solutions, to get people to defer to the experts, to get the state to ensure that what it's doing, or try and ensure what it's doing, fits that narrative. That is very similar to what's going on with COVID-19. But of course, the immediacy of the problem, it can't be put off, creates a greater degree of panic. And this panic, in a sense, further fuels the dependency upon the state, upon these technocrats. So in this sense, it's very natural that the globalizing, because the other big split in the world is in the Western world is between globalization and a rejigging of nationalism. But this, of course, pushes a much more globalist solution, because it requires global cooperation. It requires deferring to the science, etc. But then there's another problem, is that this global elite is in many ways coming out of the West. Its values are very different from the elites in non-Western countries. And this is something I think has not been fully appreciated. That disjuncture in elites, that is, in the West, the attack upon traditionalism is intrinsic to the narrative just more widely, and the COVID narrative is just one part of a broader set of concerns. And we can see this, well, I say we can see this, but the outpouring of hostility in the United States taking place right as we speak. I think it's not some people have commented on this, and I think it's not unreasonable to think that the isolations, distant social, the whole experience has led to this pent-up frustration, so that this becomes highly supercharged. So the connection is not obvious, but in a way you can see it. It's there. It's like the riots from the long hot summers. So that elite, very progressive, wanting to shape a world in one way. On the other hand, you've got a much more traditionalist view of the world, which most other elites tend to be, for various reasons, have to be much more traditionalist. And that includes China. I'll get to China very briefly now and match it up with the elites. In some ways, China has been the chief beneficiary, maybe the only beneficiary, as I've said. First of all, it's the whole trade war issue and the leverage the United States had with that. That's really very much put on the back burner. It's been able to be empowered in the region. Its actions in Hong Kong, squabbles with India, stuff in the South China Seas, it's emboldened. China is very emboldened. But I think perhaps most importantly, give me one more minute. Most importantly, what we're seeing in China is a kind of state corporatism. What we've seen in the West is increasingly a corporatist state. But in many ways, what China has shown is the future of what America is becoming. And this is really a source of great despondency for anyone who's more traditionalist and favored a more liberal democratic order of the old sort, because this is quickly vanishing as university, not only in all sorts of areas now where speech is shut down. And we see this again in COVID, the kind of narratives or the kind of contrarian positions about the way government should be responding to this, the way in which the data is collected, the way in which the data is used, the specific policies. All of this is very much sidelined. As, again, journalists say, you must defer to the science, or we will attack someone like, what's his name, Atlas. Scott Atlas comes out being very critical of Fauci's policies, and the media then becomes very critical, trying to isolate him. Whereas a lot of people, myself included, would think, well, that's making very important points about the opportunity costs, because this is an economic issue, the opportunity costs of deploying these kind of policies. We're not including other kinds of illnesses, the use of hospital resources, the way in which the data has not only been accumulated, but also interpreted. Why, for example, are the number of those infected such an important piece of data as opposed to those who died? Who's died? Why, why is someone to be classified when they come into hospital with something else, but they have COVID, as that's the most important thing? So these issues, I think, are indicative of the fact that overall the United States is not in a position to be the kind of hegemon it was, because it's in its own kind of civil war. But this kind of civil war is part and parcel of the global elite nationalist contradiction that is so important in the Western world, not outside the Western world, but it has huge impact for the West, for the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And let me invite Dr. Nathan.
Thanks, Wayne. That's a great macro overview of things. I'm going to bring things back a little more sort of local to Indonesia. And some of these are just my own observations from an outsider, of course. They might be a bit provocative and a bit a bit different to the way people think in Indonesia, but nevertheless. Anyway, just in terms of what's been going on, just some of my assessments of what has happened or what's still going on. The initial kind of steps in Indonesia, I think there was some missteps, as I said. So for a long time, Indonesia said that it didn't have the COVID virus. And I think the minister even came out, the Minister for Health and Environment came out and said that Indonesia doesn't have it because of God. I think the words that he said were something like, "Kami beruntung pada Tuhan, ini karena doa kami." So we are lucky, and that's because of our prayers. So that kind of naivety around that, and I think that goes to the ramifications of things like ministerial responsibility. So in Australia, we've got people who should know statistics about the deaths of people in aged care and that, and one of our ministers just the other day couldn't answer those questions, and so we have those problems too. Anyway, so people taking responsibility for health matters and things like that, ministerial responsibility, I think that's something that can be improved in both countries. Just on Indonesia's resilience after the disasters, usually pretty good, but unfortunately, there could be a bigger discussion about detection and disaster reduction. I'm thinking back about 2 years ago when there was a big tsunami up in Pelosok and also West Java and Banten, where after the Aceh tsunami in late 2004, there was a network of buoys in the sea that was supposed to detect tidal wave activity, and there was a pilot project set up, and then only $100,000 was needed to upgrade it to the next level, and the Indonesian Parliament didn't pass that. So just things like that. So the kind of disaster mitigation and preparation could be something that could be improved. I know that Indonesia is very good at the reconstruction and the recovery afterwards, but maybe the insurance before that could be something looked at. And of course, every country is the same, and no one wants to spend money on something that might not happen. I think the Indonesia political and economic situation will be stable, which is good. Of course, it's easy to say that now. And as I say in the next point 4, it's not necessarily about the economy now, although it is, because people want to survive, but it will be about the recovery afterwards. What sort of government programs, what sort of stimulus, what sort of economic activity will there be after this crisis? Because I think that there will be some sort of inward looking view. I know we're for sort of free trade agreements and opening up borders and all this sort of stuff to more trade, but as we found in Australia, we've outsourced a lot of our manufacturing and a lot of our productivity, and so we've had to become a little bit inward looking that way. And this will overlap in a few areas. Indonesia-China relations, as mentioned by a lot of people here, practically everyone before me, Indonesia has a kind of a mixed history of good and bad relations. Sukarno had great relations with China, and I hate to bring this up, but the PKI, the Communist Party of Indonesia, did a lot of work for the War of Independence and the Nationalist Revolution, and were key players in the early years of Indonesia and had great relations with China. And also there was the Bandung Conference in 1955, where Chow Enlai was invited to Bandung in Indonesia. So some good years in the early decades. And then, of course, after the night of September 30 in 1965 and the elimination of the communists in Indonesia, relations with China deteriorated for a long time. Relations with China were suspended after 1967 by President Suharto and only re-established in 1990. And so China remembers this, they know that, but they also know that Jokowi comes from Megawati's party, PDIP. And so they will know that PDIP has a better history with China, and China have long memories. They still talk about the rape of Nanjing by the Japanese. So China doesn't forget these things. So Indonesia, with the current government, can draw upon that kind of good history. This brings me to the next point, the stance on the South China Sea claim, particularly the Natuna Islands near Riau. I think Indonesia needs to remain firm on that and work with ASEAN. We know that China has undermined the ASEAN summits, and I think it was in 2012 where there was disunity on a communique on how to deal with China, and that still goes on. I know ASEAN's quite a diverse region with some states here that have very good relations with China. I think it's Indonesia needs to play leadership there. So in the initial phase, I know Indonesia was trying to deal with China quite sort of friendly and sort of say, oh, well, you know, we won't have a conflict, and try to be kind of a middle mediator. But then, of course, China didn't see it that way, and there was skirmishes in Natuna, and, you know, there was shots fired, and Indonesia even detained a ship, a fishing vessel from China, and that escalated. So that's going to remain ongoing. I think if China gives any leeway to Indonesia there, then they feel like they're going to have to give leeway to other places too. So I don't think unilaterally Indonesia can do anything with China. I think they need to work with ASEAN on that, and also, as much as possible, regional powers, probably like also Australia and hopefully the United States. And I know they've done exercises in the region. Just looking at, so this is just some pie in the sky things to talk about. This is an opportunity for Indonesia and other countries, including Australia, to talk about reform to their, economy and tax system. So I know in Indonesia that this is probably an area that could be looked at, reforming the tax system, income tax particularly, not just a VAT, value added tax, or what we call in Australia a GST, goods and service tax. And I also think it's an opportune time to talk about diversifying the economy. So your places like Bali, which are heavily reliant on tourism, a lot of the manufacturing there sort of has dried up. There is some, and some of that was lost during the crisis moneter in the Asia financial crisis of 97, 98. And other parts of Indonesia that are reliant on tourism and things like that to try and diversify the economy. I know that's difficult, but this is thinking long term. Just on the political side of things, probably not in the greatest order. I looked at the election last year in 2019, and I think nearly every party has a commitment to the Pancasila and the Pancasila state model. I think it's only the United Development Party, Partai Persatuan Pembangunan (P3) that still that have the ideology of Islam as their Azas Tunggal, as their foundation. I know that PKS, Partai Keadilan Sejahtera, the Justice Prosperous Party, has Pancasila Islamism as their ideological platform, but by and large, I think that commitment to that state model will remain the same, so that's stable. But I think that one thing that will play out in the next 4 years will be what happens at the parliamentary and presidential elections in 2014. Jokowi will be finishing his second and final term as president, so there'll be a vacancy there. There won't be an incumbent running again. Will Prabowo run again? Not sure. Maybe some other general or retired general, Purnawirawan, mungkin mau calonkan diri lagi. We'll see. So, but my point on this is I think the state model of Pancasila will remain, but will it become more centralized? Will it become a sort of a model like Suharto, looking at China and how they've been relatively successful in dealing with the COVID pandemic, and China being boldened with its system, and actually, as Wayne said, using this as an opportune time to deal with the problems in Hong Kong. Indonesia has largely dealt with its regional separatist movements quite well. East Timor, Aceh, the ongoing things in Irian Jaya, although much, much better than previous years. I think that's going to continue to play on for a while. So this kind of nationalism and how that plays out, who can deal with the crisis and who can keep the country together, I think that's something that's going to play out. In terms of the Indonesia-Australian relationship, fortunately, it's pretty positive at the moment. I know it's always an up and down sort of a thing, but last month on the 5th of July, there was the IACEAP, ISEPA, Indonesia-Australia Cooperative Economic Partnership Agreement, or I make a pelesetan kata, permainan kata, iya cepat, kami cepatkan kerjasama, gotong royong, the old terminology, the old istilah gotong royong, kerjasama, so we can improve our economies. So this is good. I think Australia and Indonesia need to work together on many more things. I consider Indonesia to be our jiran. That's our close friend. And as you can see there, our first map, our neighbors to the north. Where we are in Darwin, we're closer to Indonesia than our other regional capitals. Just in summary, I'm not as knowledgeable about Wayne and other people here about the macro geopolitical alignments, but I actually think there will be no significant change to the global international situation. I think it'll be a status quo, but I think, as Wayne said, China will be emboldened, and I think China will be. This will vindicate that their system and the way they do things is the best way. So how we deal with that is going to be will play out over the many months and years. We have to deal with China, whether we like it or not. Indonesia is set to become the 7th biggest economy by 2030, and so Indonesia, like Australia, is going to become very economically dependent on China in many ways. So we have to have a robust kind of debate, but I don't think we can kind of, I think we need to work together. So we need to think about the multilateral relationships and other things. So ASEAN and APEC, which I haven't talked about, and the different fora to deal with China. I think we need to continue discussions with China and dialogue. I think when we box them out and we don't include them in things, they get angry. And they have every reason to be angry because they are an emerging player in the world, second economically and militarily in the world to the United States. And as we've talked about, the United States is waning power, but I only think that's because they're so spread in so many areas, talking about the wall with Mexico and dealing with Russia and Europe and other places, and China's and the Middle East and ISIS and all those things. United States is just spread so thinly. So anyway, that's a mixed bag of things. That's just my assessment on the situation. And thank you for the opportunity to talk today. And I hope I've added some new content to the discussions. Terima kasih banyak.
Well, thank you, Professor Cristaudo and also Dr. Franklin for the elaboration and also the presentations. And dear participants, now we are move forward to the discussion or question and answer sessions. We have approximately 40 minutes for this session. And I already received quite a lot of questions from the question and answer chat room, through the chat room, this Zoom. And I will read the first four questions, and then I will ask the speaker to respond to these questions. First, from the Ahmad Aditya, can the pandemic we currently experiencing in Indonesia contribute to the civil unrest like what's happening in the USA? And the second question about the how strategic of Indonesia to increase the comparative advantage during the pandemic era. The third question is addressed to Dr. Siswo Pramono. It appears that as if the government focus right now on the vaccine development and forging a partnership with other countries to secure the vaccine for the populations. Have resources from other government gradually diverted to secure the vaccines, such as that increasing testing capacity in Indonesia is no longer focused despite the low testing rates. The Indonesia testing rates at the moment has shown some improvement, but still far below the WHO standard, and the positivity rates in the national level is above 10%. Maybe Pak Siswo later could you respond these questions. And also the other question is, I think this also addressed to our fellow speakers from Australia and as well as the other speaker from Indonesia. Will This question is from Farina Khairunisa. Will the capitalist world system survive and thrive through the COVID-19 pandemic? And even the US-China enmity escalates, can actual physical war or conflict take place since most of the manpower are at high risk for the virus? If the manpower are infected, then would there even be a point of declaring war? So I think these are the 4 first questions, and I would like to invite I think from Dr. Yandry Kurniawan first, and then followed by Ibu Vivi, Dr. Siswo, and later Professor Cristaudo and Dr. Franklin. Pak Yandry, you have the floor.
Thank you, Bu Dyah. I'm not really sure which question that I should answer directly right now, but maybe I start with Farina question. Like the capitalistic world system will survive? I think so, because like I did a second master studies in Taiwan. One of my professors said that CCP stands for China Capitalist Party. So you cannot be that communist when you have at least 10 credit cards in your wallets. So everybody is basically capitalistic, using a capital market system now. That we can have different political system. First, second, China is benefited from the current liberal market system. I mean, like the China economic growth in the last four decades, due to the submission to the liberal free market system. And then I mentioned very brief in my presentation that we are having now the Cold War #1 involving US and China, but this Cold War has at least 2 different features, very basic features that differs this Cold War with the US-Soviet competition. In the old Cold War, the Soviet Union didn't have a high degree of economic exchange in its region, in its neighborhood. Now, China has economic cooperation with all the countries in the region. So I don't know what will happen, what the effect of this situation to this so-called this Cold War, but that is the difference. And even United States, the US and China have a very deep competition in terms of political security, in terms of political security, but they have like interestingly complex economic interaction. We cannot call it cooperation because they have a trade war, but they have a very complex economic interaction between the two. So, and the second one, even though we have a Cold War involving US and China today, this Cold War will not escalate into the World War like the United States had with the Nazi Germany in the past. And this is another, previously I mentioned like a liberalism 101 in international relations, in the study of international relations. Maybe it's time to realism 101, back to the late and great Kenneth Waltz. The difference between the international system after the World War and prior to the Second World War was a strategic weapon, the existence of strategic weapon. When a student of international will be directly understand that when somebody says strategic weapon, it refers literally to nuclear weapon. So This is basically the basic premise of realist international relations. We are having Cold War nowadays between United States in China, but it differs from U.S.-Soviet competition. Why? Because China has economic cooperation within the region, a very deep cooperation, while Soviet didn't have one. Secondly, it will not escalate to the World War, the outbreak of like a total war, because of the existing strategic weapons, nuclear weapons. But if we look back to history, like World War I took place between 1914 until 1918. 1918 was the outbreak of Spanish flu. But the Spanish flu did not stop the winner of World War I to punish the axis of evil. They have Versailles Treaty, they have this, they have that, and everything. And then, right after the vaccine for the Spanish flu found in 1933, again, the Western world began another World War in 1939. So, and I don't want to sound like probably it's crucial, like the death of one man is a tragedy and the death of 1,000 men is a statistic. But COVID-19, the death toll of COVID-19 today almost 900,000 people. The death toll of Spanish flu was 50 million people. Even if the death toll was 50 million lives, it didn't stop the European power to engage in another world war. That's why I follow suit Merseymer's argument during my presentation. Disease will not end hegemonic rivalry. So maybe that is the answer, the most related question to my presentation. But if I have to answer another question, I will be happy to do it. Thank you, Budia.
Thank you, Pak Yandry. I think there is a lot of questions for you later, Pak. But I would like to invite Ibu Fifi. If you could respond the first 4 questions, please, Ibu.
Thank you, Ibu Dyah. Could you remind me which one you'd like me to answer?
How about the second question? How the strategic of Indonesia to increase comparative advantage in pandemic area?
Okay. Well, I think this relates a lot to what's already been discussed as well. I mean, we're trying to understand the changes that's occurring in the region. I highlighted a few points where we usually talk about the challenges posed by COVID-19. While at the same time, there are also experts who have said that countries can actually take advantage of some of the issues that are posed by COVID-19. And I think in terms of strategic advantage of Indonesia, if you look at it just very casually, there might not be a lot of of such strategic advantage. But I think if you look quite closely and also relates to what we've discussed about the strategic the decoupling of the U.S.-China, the increasing rivalry, and the lack of leadership in terms of the global leadership left vacant in one way or the other by the U.S. This, we've talked about what are the alternatives when we can no longer rely on the global leadership by a major power? Then what are the alternatives? And I think this has also been discussed before in various forums that we've talked about middle power diplomacy for the longest time, and I think this is where countries like Indonesia has its highest interest in terms of when there is no longer a major power that is willing to lead and make sure that the rules-based order is held upon in various regions of the world, that it's up to the other powers in the region with the interest to make sure that there is a rules-based order to actually do something. And I think this is what I talked about, the various opportunities for Indonesia to actually play a role, not in terms of changing the global landscape, but in our direct region. I think there's a lot that Indonesia can actually do, because the interest is there, and the stake for Indonesia to actually maintain regional stability is very, very high. Thank you, Budia.
Thank you, Bu Fifi. And now I would like to invite Pak Siswo, Dr. Siswo Pramono, to respond the question addressed to you, Pak. This is regarding the vaccines and also the positivity rates. Please, Pak, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Budia. There is another question.
Could you unmute your microphone, Pak?
Is it unmute now?
Yeah, it's okay now.
Yeah. There are other questions addressed to me, directly to me, is on the possibility of civil unrest like in United States, I think.
Yes, it's true, Pak.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I used to talk only on the basis of statistics and data. Yeah, so it's very difficult if we don't have a data on that, and that's why I would like to start with this. Is it on the screen now?
Yeah.
Look, this is the fragile state index. Yeah, I already mentioned in my presentation of Indonesia. Fragile state index is the way you see your vulnerability or fragility domestically. Yeah. So unrest will require if your government is not legitimate. But we are democracy, and that's why our government state legitimacy is high. Yeah. Again, the way we look at this is if the curve move from up to down, mean from fragile into less fragile. Yeah, our economy is good now. Not good. I mean, if we're comparing with others during the pandemic, we are still not -8 or -10 like Europe, yeah, or United States, but we still managed to have a very limited minus. Yeah. Now, economic inequality. I think our index Gini is also improving, getting better. Yeah. So. Yes, if we are talking about unrest, there is possibility, but a small possibility. Yeah, if you compare with the situation in United States, why the unrest is happening? Because there are two diseases in America that every government is very difficult to deal with. The first one is on the policy of weapon, yeah, gun policy. I think no president is able to take care of this because it is much deep on the tradition of White West in the past. And number two is ethnic relation between the white and Afro-American. Yeah, it is also very deep. Even though they have Afro-American president like Obama cannot solve that problem. Yeah, so every time we have incident of white police shooting the black guy in an American street. It's happening again yesterday, for instance. This is always happening there. And if you look at the situation in United States today, America is much better than Indonesia, of course, as an advanced country. But you can see here, yeah, factionalist elite is rising up. Group grievance, I think, between the Afro-Americans and white population is also rising up. Yeah. And somehow state legitimacy is also a bit rising. There's a problem with state legitimacy as well, even though America is still the best democracy in the world today. Yeah. So I think if we are talking about civil unrest at the level of LA riot and so on, it's unlikely to happen in Indonesia at the present moment because this is our situation in the last 10 years. Yeah, most of the curve is going down. Now on the vaccine, we need to yes. I think we are concentrated much on the vaccine. Yeah, but you are right. There are three. There are three actually steps that we need to do all together in unison. The first one is on the society side, and that will be the discipline in the society, wearing masks and then social distancing. At the same time, also the second step is on the hospital side, mostly on the medical side, that treatment and also tracing and testing. And yes, testing and tracing is improving, but we still lag behind on that. So we are struggling now. Yeah. In my office, in the ministry, for instance, every month they give us quick test, yeah, rapid test every month, yeah. And then every time we have people with X reactive, and then we sell it to the hospital. We send them to the hospital for the swab, yeah. So, but of course, number of facility for swab and also rapid test is very limited, and we need to improve that. You're right, we need to improve that. But at the same time, treatment is also getting better and better. But the problem is that if there are too much people to be put in the hospital, then hospital under pressure, then it will be counterproductive to the treatment. But somehow this is the result you can see in here. The green part is the recovery, yeah, and the blue part is the new cases. So in here, despite the lacking of vaccine, we see that the recovery of those who are infected is pretty high now, is 72 and it's still increasing, yeah, and it's almost in line with those who are infected, yeah, and this is the number of deaths. Now, my point is that while waiting for the vaccine, yes, what the government is doing now is to impose more discipline to the people. Just wear masks. This is the first defense, yeah, against virus. And yet it's very difficult to convince people to wear masks, yeah, not to come together in the big parties without social distancing and so on. So this is more public education, yeah. But at the same time, we try to improve testing and tracing. Now, you're right that on the positivity rate, the UNESCO set the safety line on 5%. Now, some of the provinces in Indonesia, many of them like below 5%. So if Bogor, for instance, is 3.8%, yeah. But Jakarta, it used to be 3.8, but now Jakarta is closing to 10%, yeah, for the positivity rates, yeah. So it's very dynamic, and it's much to do with the discipline of the community, but also the tough measure from the government. If they got to find people, they got to punish people if they don't wear masks. I think this is the time now, because we already give lenient education. Now it's time for law enforcement for the benefit of the whole population. But perhaps my last comment will be on the COVID and war. Yes, I think you're right. The question will be whether America and China go to open war. Now, there are a couple of things that we need to answer, and I will be using statistic again as the basis of this analysis. The first one, look at this situation. America is pretty much in the bad shape now. It's -8%, and the economic contraction. Perhaps next years they are going to rebound 4.5, but 4.5 out of -8 is small. Yeah. Now China is not in a good position either. Now still positive, yeah, 1%. But China is a very big country. They need more economic growth than any other countries. Now this is the economics obstacle, yeah, that people is going to think twice before going to the open war. Limited war, perhaps. Open war, I don't think they are going to really think of it. Just remember, when the war started, no one is going to know when to end. When America go to war with Iraq, they think there will be a couple of months and end up with 8 years. And the cost is $1 trillion US. $1 trillion US is just like our whole GDP. of Indonesia. Yeah, so this must be taken into consideration. It's just like rolling the dice. When the dice rolling, you never know the number that come up from the dice. You go to war preparing for 1 year, it end up with 10 years. Afghanistan, for instance, it costs almost 800 billion for United States. Now, this is the second one. Now they also consider for the COVID situation. You are right. Yeah, most of the COVID happen in the limited compartment, not in the open air. Yeah, and most of the war in the Pacific will be in the crumbs in the Navy vessel ships, where people can easily be infected one to the others, not like an infantry marching on the open air. Yeah. So I think this will be another consideration. Yet China already have the vaccine. America is not yet find the vaccine on that. Yeah. So again, I think this will be another consideration in which open war is likely not to happen, even though the possibility is there. But limited conflicts might happen. The last is this. Yeah. China is nuclear power. America is nuclear power. Look at this statistic again. The possibility of nuclear war is small. Why? Because the two countries are trying to prevent that from happening. No nuclear war after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because of the mutually assured destruction nature of civil war. America can reach China, China can reach America, and boom, both dead. Yeah. So I think this is another prevention from the realist point of view on the mutually assured destruction theories, that when you have nuclear weapons, you're not going to use it. It's for deterrence, not for real game. Yeah. So that's why in here you can see this nuclear weapons. Yeah, it's a possibility of usage very small, but the impact when they are used is very, very, very high. And that's at the same time give you a sense of mutually assured destruction, and you're not going to use it because it's just split second. They launch it from America, the other launch it from China, and boom, both that. Yeah. So I think this is one analysis. What we are afraid of when America deploy assets, yeah, warship in the South China Sea, China deploy the same things, and somehow there is an accident. Vessel and vessel got bumped to the others, or some nervous soldier open fire by accident, something like that, and things gone out of hand. Yeah. So I think this is my response to the question. Ibu Dyah, thank you.
Thank you, Pak Siswo. I think we will move forward to the next question. And since our fellow speaker from Australia have another program, so I will send the question to them first. The question is from Mabda Indonesia, Siddiq. This about taking account to Biden's possible victory in the US and his interest to establish US leadership. What are the probable alterations we will likely see in terms of multilateral health and security institution and cooperation? How will Indonesia and Australia respond to the possibility of US renewed leadership under Biden? And the other question addressed to Pak Nathan also, should Indonesia show transparency of their political system to the citizen, or it's already transparent? I think I would like to invite Pak Nathan or Professor Cristaudo to respond the question first. Please, the screen is yours,
Yeah, I think,
Pak Nathan.
If I understood the question, it's what will the response be if Biden wins the presidency? Is that what difference will that make to the global order? Is that right?
Pak. Yes, correct, Pak.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm not into the business of prophecy, but I will be surprised if Biden wins the election, given the riots in the United States and the impact that is having. So I'll be very surprised if he wins. If he wins, I don't think anything really changes in terms of the elites that you've got information, the discontents within the or the polarizations occurring within the United States. And the picture that I was painting of basically a factionalism that will also is inevitably going to occur within the elites themselves, which ultimately makes China, Russia, but those that are more traditionalist in their values better positioned to the other vassal states of the world outside the West. And that's what basically what I think is the case, is that the economic handling, the economic consequences of COVID-19, I didn't get to this in my talk, are so important that any policies that are taken in order to get greater safety, which come at a very great economic sacrifice, when we're not even sure that the policies being adopted really are the best policies. This is just, I haven't heard this in the discussion, but it just seems to me the center point, not only here, but just generally, the way in which the discussion is occurring around public policy and the way that has accelerated globally has been one in which gives me little faith in the way in which technocratic elites behave. In fact, I don't have much faith in it, because anyone who's a specialist knows that the more you know, the less you know. And the idea that there is a definite solution to a complex problem that spills out beyond health into all sorts of, as I said, opportunity costs, even other health issues because of the way resources. This is extraordinarily complex. So the kind of mindset in which there's a unified party position, which is the Chinese traditional way of doing it, that facilitates easy solutions, but it closes down a greater palette for dealing with problems in the future. But as I said, I think the United States is copying China, because China has really set the way of how nations are responding, and it did in such a way that it's economically advantaged by doing it that way. It's come out of this very well. If it's learned anything, it would be, well, viral warfare. That's a really useful thing to do in the future. I mean, that I'm kind of exaggerating there, but not completely. So in terms of the larger dynamics of, if the more traditional elite in the US is victorious in the election, that to me doesn't solve the problem at all. And it's very interesting how many former generals have come out critical of Trump's presidency, and why it is that the intelligence services plus the military would not be backing a more traditionalist agenda, because Biden might have once been traditionalist, but he's caught up in this progressive sweep, which is now defining the Democrat Party. This only leads to further isolation of the United States, because most people in the world do not see their problems in terms of sexual identity or racial identity. This is peculiar to stuff coming out of the US. It's obsessions, its history. And then as that gravitates around the world because of their place within the world as a hegemon, not only, you could say Bush showed one side of the hegemony, which was the hegemony of the military, but Obama showed the other side of its aspiration to be the hegemony of the ideas. But ultimately, this becomes very isolating. Just to wrap it up, sorry. But the way that I'll come back. China is the only winner. Biden, not Biden. Irrelevant in terms of the greater problems that are being played out. And ultimately, those nations which have positioned themselves via politically, and the elites within those nations, within a set of values in which more liberal democratic aspirations are central to their vision, they are becoming increasingly caught up in the crossfire and hence increasingly marginalized. This is a very serious set of implications globally. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Ibu Dyah. So the question, I think, was about transparency. Is that right?
Yeah.
Look, Indonesia's got a great democratic system. You should be very proud. Indonesia has come a long way in 22 years. I mean, the way that Indonesia is able to keep its democratic system together with, you know, minor parties and coalitions, I think is amazing. Indonesia should be very proud of that. I mean, that was something that Sukarno always wanted and the Indonesians wanted in the nationalist revolution of 45 to 49. So I think that's a hard fought victory and Indonesia shouldn't give that up. So, you know, whatever happens in 2024, you know, hopefully there's a commitment to those sort of democratic values. I'll just say something else on my presentation. So I know I talked about a number of key points, but the central thesis of my talk was really, don't worry about the things that are okay or are easy to deal with. You know, focus on the difficult things, have a robust and open debate about it, and look at it as an opportunity for where we can improve, and be honest about where weaknesses are. You know, I know that it takes a lot of courage to sort of say, oh, you know, these are our problems and we're weak here and we need help or we can do better. But I think that's starting to get lost. Now, I know in Australia, we talked about reform to the economic system and reform to, you know, different parts of our society. And in the initial months that was sort of being talked about, but that's all gone. And I think one of the reasons for that is because people just want to get back to normal. People just want their normal lives back. And going back to normal is better than what we've got now. But I think we're in for some really difficult times. Now, one of the things that the Australian government and the Indonesian government and other governments around the world haven't talked about is austerity. We are all in big debt, right? And there's going to be a cut in services, a cut in social programs and government spending, and we're going to have to go back to austerity, where governments pull back spending, try and reduce costs, and try and get the budget back into the black. I know there's been some discussion about this, was it MMT, that new public, the management of money, how that can be done. It was a Biden, the Bill Sir thing. Monetary theory. MMT, the new monetary theory. Now that came out of, I think, Bernie Sanders' one of his advisors. I think that's just another theory that we talk about but I think we'll just go back to conventional politics and economics about how we deal with problems. I think there's some opportunities here, but I also think people are a bit tired of talking about COVID and how we can get through it. People just want to go back to normal. So I think governments need to be careful about how they spend their political capital and their ability, because at the moment no one can really do anything. It's about saving lives, it's about defeating the virus, and you know, with varying degrees of success. So I think the next 2 years will be very, very critical about like kind of where we get to in the recovery phase afterwards, and kind of, you know, what services we can expect from the state, what we're going to lose in terms of services, and, you know, will taxes be increased? Because I think in Australia taxes will have to be increased, maybe the GST, the VAT, I don't know. So we shall see. But eventually these discussions have to happen. You know, how are we going to get out of debt? How are we going to revive the economy again? What are we going to do? So anyway, that's just my 5 cents on everything.
I think so, Pak.
Terima kasih.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pak Nathan, and also Professor Cristaudo for all your inputs and also ideas in this seminar. Looking forward to cooperate with you, Pak, in the near future.
We thank you, Ibu Dyah. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Nice to meet everyone.
See you, Pak. And now we would like to move forward to the the third round of the questions. I would like to, I think Ibu Vivi, you got 2 questions in this chat room in the question and answer is about the crisis expert survey 2020, whether in Indonesia itself, the economic crisis during the pandemic getting better or worse. And the next question is regarding the pertaining the US-China strategic rivalry. We have seen the escalation and the escalation behavior from the two states, especially in the South China Sea. Ibu Fifi already discussed partially on the pandemic effect on the leaders' perceptions. Will COVID-19 pandemic significantly affect both states' policy pertaining of the rivalry? And also there is another question, especially for Pak Siswo and also Pak Yandry. This came from Pak Hendra. What is your point of view on the current Indonesia international political economy position in the midst of COVID-19, responding to the US and China strategic rivalry in South China Sea? And also from Ibu Evi Fitriani to the three speakers, Pak Siswo, Pak Yandry, and also Ibu Fifi. Does being a member of MIKTA give Indonesia and other MIKTA members a better platform to align their cooperation amid so many challenges on multilateralism nowadays? And we also have a question from the YouTube channel. I think from Pak Rene Pati Rajawani. I have sent the question through the chat room, Pak, and I would like to invite also Pak Siswo to respond the question from Pak Rene. And the first turn, I would like to invite Ibu Fifi to respond the question addressing to you. The screen is yours, Ibu.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ibu Dyah. For the first question regarding the economic crisis, I have to apologize because this is really not my field of expertise, but I suppose, when we do release this, the report of the survey, we will announce it. But we do have a very specific section. My colleagues in CSIS Economics Department have handled that part of the survey. And we did mention, put a lot of questions related to, economic projections. I'm afraid I'm not in the place to actually explain about it. But from what I gather so far reading the report is that, most of the experts answer based on the condition now. And there is a lot of pessimism with regards to the economic projection. Judging 1, 2, 3, 5 years from now, and seeing that most of the economists are predicting we will actually continue to go further into an economic crisis. But I don't think I should go further into explaining something that I'm not the expert about. Let's focus on the second question with regards to the US-China rivalry, and then on the South China Sea. It's quite interesting because people talk about the pandemic affecting or increasing this geopolitical rivalry, but as I said in my presentation, is that the pandemic is not creating the rivalry. I mean, the rivalry is there and has been there for the longest time. It does point out, the issues of weakness where the rivalry can actually be more apparent. And so far, I mean, we look at the economic, the technological rivalry from the two major states, and it seems that these are the places where we will see further points where of rivalry. But in terms of security issues such as the South China Sea, yes, we have been witnessing actions from China, for example, assertive actions from China in the South China Sea, which is seen as something that is disrupting the stability in the region. But when it comes to the US-China rivalry in the South China Sea, I don't think that the COVID-19 actually plays a great role into making things worse than it is. There are reasons why China is behaving the way it is behaving, and there are reasons why the US is pulling out slowly or quickly. You can look at it from both perspectives, from the affairs in the South China Sea, or in Southeast Asia in general. But I don't think that COVID-19 is part of the reason why these policies or these actions are made. There are other calculations. There are other factors that are contributing to how these actions occur. And from a lot of analysis have been done by this, but the rivalry itself is usually seen as the factor that's adding to the increase of the rivalry, which is you can see sort of like a very interesting circle of actions from both the US and China. So looking at it in the future, I wouldn't put too much weight into putting the COVID-19 factor in terms of the US-China rivalry in the South China Sea specifically. But there are other factors that have been more contributing factors in terms of the worsening of the situation. Thank you, Ibu Dyah.
Thank you for the response, Ibu Fifi. And now I would like to invite Pak Yandry to respond for the two questions from Pak Hendra and also Ibu Evi.
Thank you, Bu Dyah. I don't have any education background in the field of international political economy, so I'm not in the position to answer the question. But I totally second Fifi's argument that is not how COVID-19 affects the rivalry between US and China. But I would like to say that first, we are witnessing the Cold War involving US and China. The Cold War that, theoretically speaking, will not escalate it into a total war, a total open war, like a world war, yeah, in foreseeable future. Foreseeable future, that will means like around another 50 years, half centuries to go. But that's why we call it a Cold War, because the war will not escalate it to open war. And now, during the President Obama administration, United States initiated the pivot to Asia. Pivot to Asia is another work of containment policy. Then also the President Obama also introduced, then cut lost by President Trump, a TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. Trans-Pacific Partnership is another word for economic containment. Now, President Trump's administration strengthened the previously already mentioned the Indo-Pacific. Indo-Pacific is another form of containment policy. We could trace this containment policy all the way to the Monroe Doctrines. So basically, in a sense, nothing really changed in the principle of American foreign policy. And how the American contained the Western Hemisphere during the Cold War from the Soviet influence. The same strategy also apply to contain the China influence in the region in order to avoid China from becoming regional hegemon. This is a textbook of realist perspective, or like offensive realist perspective to be more precise. So that is my takes on this. I would consistently use the word Cold War describing the situation involving US and China, because it's already there. If we look back again to history, in 1946, we have the sinew of peace, then will become well known as the Iron Curtain speech. That's already a Cold War. Then in 1948, we have a letter from Mr. X titled "The Source of Soviet Conduct." But back then, it was only a speech. It was only a letter. But then that speech and that letter define the world, the international system for the next 40 years. So in this perspective, in line of this logic, pivot to Asia, Trans-Pacific Partnership, Indo-Pacific, and I don't know what else will come in the futures, in the near futures. It will be another word for containment policy. So now I will move to Mbak Evi question about MIKTA. In my opinion, I mean, to the best of to the best I can argue that MIKTA will be like a nice diplomatic friendship. You know? Why? At least I can come up with at least two basic reasons. First, Mexico, Indonesia, South Korea, Turkey, and Australia doesn't really share a common national interest. Okay. Mexico, now, second, it totally depends on the leader of each country. Mexico is shifting, is follows the Brazil and US to the rightist political aspiration. Indonesia, we are the primus inter pares of Southeast Asia. We will keep our focus. We will keep ASEAN as the spears of our foreign policy. We will keep focus on Southeast Asia. South Korea have their own problem. Maybe Indonesia and South Korea share common interest in Korean Peninsula, of course, East Asia, East China Sea, and South China Sea. Turkey, they have their own domestic political dynamics. They have their own foreign policy orientation, and I'm not really sure where the Turkish foreign policy heading on. Previously, like some 10, 15 years ago, Turkey pushed its effort, try their best, try to do anything possible in joining European Union. Now Turkey become the fierce enemy, very critical of the European Union. And then Australia, like the deputy sheriff of United States in the Pacific. So Australia, I don't know, like Professor Wine, Nathan's already gone, but I don't know, based on the empirical information since the World War II, American foreign policy will always look at the Western agenda. So, and then back to the academic textbook. States should focus on its own neighborhood. So we can go back to the regional hegemon from the John Mearsheimer, or we can go to the regional security complex of Copenhagen School, or we can go to the regional security and regional leader and security framework. But basically, the state should focus on their regional environment, to their own neighborhood. Thank you, Budia.
Thank you, Pak Yandry, for the comprehensive response to the question. Now, I'd like to invite Dr. Siswo Pramono to also respond the question, Pak, and also respond the question delivered by Pak Rene through the YouTube channel. Please, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Ibu Dyah. Yeah, first, I think I would like to reply to Pak Rene, Pak Dirajawani. He actually, he raised many questions, 5. So perhaps I'm not going to answer all of them. Give a chance to other colleagues to answer it. But the first question is very interesting. He asked whether or not the U.S.-China rivalry today, now, is going to alter the equilibriums into new equilibrium, or it might create a new disequilibrium. I think I would rather to see more on the second part, that now it's got to be new disequilibrium because this is still in the process. Yeah, and the new equilibrium will come much later. Yeah. But what is happening is actually beyond that. Yeah. So U.S.-China rivalry now, I don't think this is the same, even though this the spirit of Cold War, with the rivalry between United States and Soviet Union in the 70s, for instance. No, United States and Soviet Union rivalries in the Cold War in the 1970s is pretty much ideological. Yeah, that's why then we have the non-aligned movement. But rivalry between United States and China is absolutely geopolitical based economic contention, because it starts, we remember, with 4.0 industrial revolution, but 5G technology. But yes, it has some security implication. But as reported by World Economic Forum, the last report in 2020, I just finished reading it. 70 to 75% of geopolitical problem we are going to have in the future, or even starting today, is economic contention. And this is precisely why there is no trade war between United States and Soviet Union, but there is a trade war between United States and China. Yeah. So and the reason for this is actually also pretty much economic. If you look at the GDP, yeah, this is again statistic. Real GDP or GDP purchasing power parity. Now, 10 years ago, America is #1 in the world. Today, if you are talking about GDP purchasing power parity, China is #1, America is #2. Yeah. Now, 10 years from now, you can see the projection of IMF or World Bank. China will be #1 in GDP purchasing power parity, India #2, America down again #3. Yeah. And then after that, Indonesia, and then Turkey, and then comes Mexico and others. So it's not only that the two countries, America and China, has a rivalries that they based on political and economic contention, even though ideology is still there, but the whole setup of global order is changing. In the past, the so-called global order is decided by the West. It can be by the winner of the World War II, but now it's by developing countries, because the largest economy is developing countries. So this is the very fundamental change in the global order. And they are not from the West. China is Asia, India is Asia, Indonesia is Asia, and then Turkey is Western Asia. Yeah, so the only remains in the bloc is representing the West. If we are talking about 5 big economies, is United States. Yeah, so if the question will be whether or not the future global economy and global order is rule-based, yes, I think it remains rule-based. But the problem, the rule is changing. Yeah, remain rule-based, but perhaps with the new rules, because the new guys coming and they want to have the rules that, of course, in line with their culture. Yeah, so I think this is more complexity. Number 2, it's no longer static or state-based, UN and others. But as I presented in my presentation, multinational corporation, big company will play an important role. Out of 100 largest economies, 75 are companies. And of the 75 companies, 50% of it are Asian companies. So never before the world faith is determined by companies like today. On vaccine, we are determined by, we much depend on the Sinovac, this is the company, and on Genexine from South Korea is company, CEPI is company, G42 is company, United Arab Emirates. So we depend our life now to fight COVID on companies. Yeah, this is quite different. nature when America engaged in ideological war with Soviet Union in 1970s. At that time, the world also have pandemic, smallpox. But remember, you can see from the economic journal or political journal in 1970s, America and Soviet Union hand in hand under the umbrella of WHO, America produced 50 million doses of vaccine to be devoted to the world, and Soviet Union provide 25 million of vaccine. They can work together because the nature is not economic contention. Now, can you expect America and China working together to contribute vaccine to the world? There is no question on that. So again, this is the different nature of equilibrium. So my prediction, yes, now we are in the stage of new disequilibrium, but perhaps 10 years from now we are going to have a new equilibrium. I think the rest of the other question we can ask other panelists to answer. Now on the South China Sea, I think this is from. Who asked from the Prof in the Sea? Indonesian strategic position, yeah, in the South China Sea. I think the way we see the situation, we have three levels. The first level is that we see South China Sea as the backyard of the competition or rivalry between China and United States. Power projection. In this case, Indonesian position is very clear. We have ZOFAN, Zone on Peace, Freedom and Neutrality, and ASEAN just declared, I think, make a statement a couple of weeks ago that ASEAN will remain loyal to ZOFAN. Yeah, so neutrality means that we are not going to take side America or China. Number two, we also remind America and China, remember, you are parties to TAC, Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. So you need to settle down things, more talk, more dialogues on the spirit of TAC. This is in the first level, yeah, ZOFAN and TAC. Now we also have the second level of conflict in the South China Sea. This is among the claimant. China is a claimant, and we have other claimant of jurisdictional dispute in the South China Sea, so Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia. Indonesia is no claimant, yeah. So the situation on the overlapping jurisdiction among claimants must be settled peacefully among claimants by negotiation. This is our position. Number three levels is dispute outside of jurisdictional overlapping jurisdiction. Yeah, so that means the case of Natuna, for instance, or northern part of Indonesia, exclusive economic zone. In here, our position is clear. We only negotiate with counterpart or parties who has legitimate claim. Legitimate claim is claim based on UNCLOS, but we have differences on the interpretation of UNCLOS. So for instance, between Indonesia and Vietnam, Vietnam claim is based on UNCLOS, Indonesia claim is based on UNCLOS, but we have different interpretation of UNCLOS. Okay, then we deal with for negotiation. But as far as 9 dash line is concerned, this is not UNCLOS. How can we negotiate something that is outside UNCLOS? UNCLOS is the constitution of the ocean. So that's why our firm position in the Natuna regions, the Sea of Natuna, we only have two overlapping as far as UNCLOS is concerned with Vietnam and with Malaysia. And we are working together with the countries, with our counterpart, Malaysia and Vietnam, to resolve it based on UNCLOS, because it's just different interpretation. So I think this is the answer for the strategic position, our strategic position in the South China Sea. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Siswo. Distinguished participant and also our fellow speakers, I think we already exceed the time limitation, already 15 minutes. So I would like to, I do apologize to the participant whose question were not answered yet by the speakers due to the time constraint. However, we will convey the question to all the speakers and try to find out how to reach you back with the answer. And before we conclude the webinar, I would like to repeat what Ibu Fifi already said, the statement of Richard Hess, that the world following the pandemic is unlikely to be radical different from the one that preceded. COVID-19 will not so much change the basic direction of world history as it accelerated. And now, since we are already finalized all the agenda of the international webinar today, we would like to extend our appreciation to the Vice Dean of the Social and Politics Faculty of the University of Indonesia, Professor Dr. Dodi Prayogo, for the support and cooperation to arrange this wonderful event. We would also like to express our thanks and gratitude to all the speakers, Pak Yandry, Ibu Fifi, and also Pak Nathan and Professor from the Charles Darwin University, and of course for my boss, Dr. Siswo Pramono, for the time to share the ideas in this webinar and also provide us with the many input suggestions how to respond the changing political landscape through the pandemic COVID. And our thanks also appreciation also convey to our participants for your valuable times and participation in this webinar. We do hope that we could invite all of you in the other series of the PADA webinar. Actually, we have quite a lot of series in cooperation with the other university and again, thank you to all of you and see you in the next webinar. Good afternoon, and I would like to give the screen back to Diana.
Thank you, Mrs. Dyah. Distinguished participants, this event has now come to the very end. I would like to kindly remind you to click